Morning, everyone. Today's Tuesday, July 17th, 2018. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary,
Excuse me,
please
sir.
call the
Before
roll.
we begin the new meeting, the Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed. No. Is there, that was a special agenda, yes. Is there a motion to adjourn the closed session?
It's a correction, sir. It's item 1A, which
1A,
was
I'm
on the
sorry.
special agenda.
Okay, do we need a motion on this?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. So I need to adjourn this special meeting then?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll adjourn this special meeting. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All
Oh,
in
we did
favor?
that already.
Okay. We're going to do it twice. It'll be doubly closed. Okay, so now we will open the July 17th meeting of the regular board meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll into the regular meeting.
Let the record reflect Commissioner Sobroff, Johnson, Figueroa Villa, McLean Hill, and Goldsmith are present. We have a quorum.
Okay. On the consent agenda, do we have any comments, public comments on any of the items?
We have one card on 1C, one card on 1D, and two cards on 1E.
Okay, so may we have a motion to approve?
I'll move items 1A, B. Did you say we had cards on C and D?
C, D, and E.
Okay, I'll move item also 1F, G, H, I, J, K, L, and M.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, let's hear the comments on
On
the consent
1C?
agenda items. So you have one comment on 1C.
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Novick on 1C.
Mr. Novick, good morning.
Morning. So I'm up to point out again the vast amounts of money you're accepting from the Los Angeles Police Foundation, which is a conflict of interest for yourself, Mr. Soboroff, and for the department as a whole. This is $11,000 plus for the travel for the International Association of Auto Theft Investigators training seminar for the benefit of the Commercial Crimes Division. I again urge the board to reject these donations and urge the Los Angeles Police Foundation and any other nonprofit organizations in the city to put that money into community needs for housing, education, jobs, drug rehabilitation, spending vast amounts of money week after week. This week, I think it comes to over $85,000 that you're accepting for the police department, on top of the fact that they already use over half the budget of the city and are tapping into funds that are supposed to be meant for the homeless and for services. I think it's unconscionable that week after week you rubber stamp these donations and allow the police department to soak up so much funding that could go better to other causes. If there are problems with auto theft, I think the way to deal with that actually would be to make Los Angeles auto-free, to prohibit driving private automobiles in downtown and other parts of the city, and increase the use of public transit in the city. Then you wouldn't have a problem with auto theft because you wouldn't have autos polluting the atmosphere. So I would urge the board of police commissioners to recommend that as a policy to the city council instead of trying to stop the problem of people stealing automobiles.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion for approval of item 1C.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone
No.
opposed? Okay, let's go to 1D.
1D, Mr. Novick.
Is that
Me
the
again.
only speaker on 1D?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Novick?
So this is another $35,000 from the Los Angeles Police Foundation. Again, a conflict of interest for yourself, Mr. Soboroff, and for the board as a whole. This is $35,000 from the Foundation for Department employees to attend the Los Angeles Women Police Officers 2018 Symposium and the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives 23rd Annual Conference. You didn't see fit to consider a woman executive for the head of the department, and I think it's the height of hypocrisy to talk about the role of women in the LAPD when you're unwilling to even consider a woman to head the department. It's been proven that women officers are much less prone to violence than male officers and tend to de-escalate. But the culture of the Los Angeles Police Department from the top down militates against that. So I think, again, in addition to the fact that this is another $35,000 that could be better spent on community needs, on public services, on drug rehabilitation. And I think you should be basically looking into ways to disarm and de-escalate the police and to feminize the department if you have it in existence at all. I don't think this is the method to do it. So I would urge the Board of Commissioners to reject this money from the Police Foundation and to urge them to put their money into other purposes and services. I think, again, it's unconscionable to spend the amount of money that you do and to approve the additional amounts on top of that week after week in a rubber stamp format.
Okay, I'll move approval of item 1D. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the last one is 1E.
1E, sir, and we have 3 cards. We have Mr. Novick, Adam Smith, and Jonathan Foster.
Okay, Mr. Novick.
I'm up again. Department report dated June 29th is to accept another $25,000 from Los Angeles Police Foundation. Again, a conflict of interest for yourself, Mr. Soboroff, and for the Board of Police Commissioners. $25,000 more going to the LAPD on top of all the money they take for other purposes. But this one is particularly aggravating because it's to provide community awareness about the realities surrounding sex trafficking of minors in the city. And given that there has never been a complete accounting of the scandal with police cadets and the sexual abuse thereof by officers in the LAPD, I think that you should reject this money. And if they want to provide some money for an investigation of the LAPD on sex trafficking of minors, then that might be better spent.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Adam Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Good morning. I too, of course, think that these weekly donations from the Police Foundation are super problematic. This one specifically is a media campaign. I'm just wondering, the money's going to the Detective Support and Vice Division. I'm wondering if there's and I know that no one's going to answer me, but is there an audit system in place for these donations that get handed off to different departments and different divisions to make sure that whatever programs are supposed to go to, that they actually go to? Is there any process beyond the approval of this commission saying, yes, we'll take $25,000 and pass it along to this department? Is there any audit process in place to determine that they're using these funds like they're supposed to?
Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Foster. Los Angeles Police Foundation has audited financial statements for your information.
This is it says it's associated with sex trafficking, and of course everybody'd like to get rid of the idea, but I think the holding on to Special Order 40 has allowed sex trafficking to continue in Los Angeles since 1979. This commission since 1979 with Chief Daryl Gates has sex trafficked girls right into America. For how many years is it? 79, 89, 99, 2009. We're almost on 40 years of sex trafficking. Jimmy Carter and this commission, Daryl Gates, is the sex trafficker. And you're finally, after 39 years, I think we're finally... Did you know that 20 years ago they had already made all these decisions that they were going to get on top of sex trafficking? And you know, in 20 years they haven't hardly put a dent in it? And it might be because of things like Sanctuary Order 40. That's what I call it. So I definitely would like to, end sex trafficking. So I think it's just late, real late. You know that some of these girls that were sex trafficked already passed away and died. They're gone. What help? What are you doing for them? They're in the ground. They were sex trafficked, and apparently it just wasn't fast enough. I don't know what the hell's wrong.
I'll move approval of the item. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, is that it for the consent calendar?
That's all for the consent items, sir.
Let's move to item 2A.
Before we go to 2A,
Yeah.
I'd just like to say a few words about John Mack, if you don't mind.
Sure, please.
As most people know, particularly people in this room know, a few weeks ago, Los Angeles lost one of the most important leaders this city has ever seen in John Mack. He spent his life as a dedicated public servant. His selfless dedication to this city was truly unmatched. The role he played on the Urban League, the role he played, particularly after the riots in rebuilding South LA, just can't be overstated. Many of the people in this room, many of the people from the department, from the commission, were at his funeral and heard the things that were said about him. The role he played on this police commission, I think he really set the standard for what a police commissioner, the role of a police commissioner, the impact a police commissioner can have, and the importance of the police commission on the LAPD in the city of Los Angeles. He has always been the standard that I have measured myself by. He was an unbelievable role model to me personally, and I know to many people in the department and in the city of Los Angeles. He was a great mentor to me. He was a dear friend. I know I speak for everyone on the commission and for many people in the department. I'm sure everyone he interacted with in the department when I say that we will miss him greatly.
Also, at the end of this month, the City Council will hopefully move forward on a resolution to rename this very room in honor, out of respect, to Mr. Mack in perpetuity. Thank you. Okay. Let's go on to item 2A.
Item number 2A, Department and Inspector General's verbal update on the status of the recommendations from the Inspector General's report dated June 14, 2018, relative to the review of the Los Angeles Police Department's jail and holding tank structures and procedures.
Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chief, Mr. Tifank, Mr. Smith. I'm Commander Vito Palazzolo, and this is Captain Gary Newton from Custody Services Division, and to my right is staff from the Inspector General's.
Jonathan Oda. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this morning, the department, along with Mr. Smith, will provide a verbal update relative to the Inspector General's report on the jails that was presented to you on June 19th.
Thank you.
Since the last meeting, we've had an opportunity to assess many of the recommendations made. The department has met internally and with the Inspector General and his staff to discuss the recommendations. As mentioned at the last time we met, the department is in concurrence with most of the recommendations, and implementation has begun. The progress of those being implemented was discussed with the Inspector General and his staff. There are some recommendations that would need additional time to evaluate or are not practical to implement in their current form. I will discuss these recommendations and invite Mr. Smith to comment as these issues have been discussed with him. First of all, the removal of the jail doors that contain bars, identified as possible anchor points for suicides, will be a challenging recommendation to implement. These doors exist at our older facilities at the Valley Regional Jail, Pacific Jail, and Hollywood Jail. And some of the shuttered area jails may also have these older doors. The design and construction of these facilities are antiquated, but their use is grandfathered under Title 24 of the Government Code. Changing the doors of these facilities may invalidate the grandfathering, requiring all new construction of the facilities. As an alternative, the department is exploring installing plexiglass spit shields over the bars, which may reduce the anchor point potential of the doors. The assessment of this solution will evaluate the cost, ability to monitor inside the cells, whether ventilation in the cells will be affected, which would significantly increase the cost, and the real benefit of reducing or eliminating the anchor points. The recommendation to provide a private space to ask arrestees screening questions is challenging as well. Our regional jails were designed and constructed to be able to process arrestees expeditiously so officers could return to the field as quickly as possible. Privacy concerns were not thought of or in the specifications of the jail design of the time. The department is currently looking at ways privacy and asking these questions can be improved. But short of redesigning and rebuilding certain portions of the jails, the options for this recommendations are limited. An assessment of the pilot program of the classification and housing officer was conducted since our last meeting. This program has some merit, and some of its benefits can be implemented without implementing additional staff for the program itself. Limitations of staffing will make it impractical to implement the program citywide 24/7. The program will require 17 additional senior detention officers. Given that the department is still not fully staffed in the detention officer classification due to cutbacks in the civilian staffing during the recession years, adding 17 more, even if approved during next year's budget cycle, will not realize its implementation until sometime in 2021 at the earliest. We are confident that short of adding more staff, we can do a better job in properly screening and housing inmates by working with the mental evaluation unit to provide the full 40-hour MIT training to additional custody staff at the regional jails, and improvements that are already underway in the screening questionnaire and improved communications with arresting officers, we feel will accomplish much of what the classification and housing officer would do. The department will require more time to assess the recommendations related to how all in-custody deaths are investigated and adjudicated. To thoroughly evaluate the merits of these recommendations, their impact, a review of national best practices related to these types of investigations, follow-up discussions with the Commission, Use of Force, and jail subcommittees, and to give an opportunity for the newly installed Chief of Police to weigh in would be most appropriate. We are not ready to discuss these recommendations in detail now. However, it should be noted that all in-custody deaths are currently thoroughly investigated, equivalent to any categorical use of force investigation by Force Investigation Division. And when performance deficiencies or misconduct are identified, an appropriate response is undertaken. This level of investigation will not be altered while we consider the recommendations related to the reclassification and adjudication of in-custody deaths. The department respectfully requests an additional 45 days to undertake this evaluation.
May we hear from the Inspector Generals?
Sure. Commissioner, if I could, Mark Smith, Inspector General. The commander had really the meat of the progress the department's made, and I appreciate you running down the sort of the most crucial items. The only thing that I think I really have to add is to mention that I appreciated the meeting that we had last week. The department really took the time to run through every single one of our recommendations to let us know in detail where they're at, what progress they had made, what concerns they had. We stand by our recommendations as they were intended to together find a way to decrease or minimize in every way, shape, and form possible instances of deaths in LAPD custody. However, we also do recognize that the department does not operate in a vacuum and that budgetary concerns are realistic for this department and for everyone. What I was really appreciative of from the department was that in cases where they did have budgetary concerns, just as the commander mentioned, for instance, with personnel to staff the CHO position, they said, look, that's going to be tough for us because of the money it would take, but we're trying to think of other options. And for instance, in that sense, they said we can do better training for some of our custody staff personnel that will serve some of the purposes of that position. Another example where we discussed privacy for inmates, which was another one I think that the commander mentioned briefly. They said, look, to really do that well, it would take major reconstruction of the entire jail facility, which is not so easy to do. But let's look at other options. We'll look and see if is there a possibility of getting sort of plexiglass dividers that can provide at least some level of privacy. So at each and every turn when they went through our numbered recommendations. They took the time to say, here's what we've done so far, here's where we have a problem, but here's what we think we can do that will get us as close as possible. So I just wanted to mention from our office that we appreciated sort of the time that was taken by the department to do so. I understand, as the commander mentioned, they want to come back in 45 days. There are a couple of those recommendations they still need to sort of work out, consider, and talk with the chief about. And we're anxious to hear, and excited to hear what happens as they come back to us again.
Thank you, sir. From your office, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm with the OIG. I have nothing further to add on top of the Inspector
Okay.
General's comments.
Okay.
Thank
Do
you.
we have any commission questions? Okay. Do we have any public comments on this?
Yes, sir, we have two. We have Jonathan Foster and Lisa Hines.
Okay. Mr. Foster? There's no action taken, and then we'll hear back from you again.
I apologize, there's three cards.
Okay.
Jonathan Foster, Lisa Hines, and Paula Miner.
Okay.
Been very tough to hear about Waukesha and having to change the jails. I know that's not the last person that ever died in a jail. I hope it's the last person that does die in a jail, though. Don't we all just wish that was the last person that died in a jail? Thank you. Yes. Even better. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. Thank you. Yes, we do wish that she didn't die in a jail. Boy, it's too late, isn't it? But they are trying. I mean, we're all still living. We could end up in there for some stupid reason and end up dying in the jail still, can't we? Yes, today we can. Some stupid thing could go on. And so, but the jail staff was told that she was picked up for a suicide issue and had assaulted somebody, and so they knew what was up, and she should have been on a 24-hour suicide watch, and she wasn't. And the jail staff that put her in the position that she is was already reprimanded for doing such a thing, and so now it's a murder. Say that. Yeah, it's a murder. That's how I see it. So unless we can see the 22 minutes video that everybody is saying that she really did kill herself, then maybe we might have some solace, but we're not getting the 22 minutes. I'm not getting I'm not even related to these people. I don't have. Right, exactly. That's right. But see, when I came down here and I'm hearing what's going on, and I got 60 years of service to the United States military in my family, and I've grown up on Air Force bases and Army bases, and I'm seeing what's going on. How many Marines got to die before we finally got to this? She's taken a huge loss. So there really needs to be an arrest of the jail staff and a prosecution, and then they can get the $22 million that they deserve. And $22 million isn't enough, isn't it? Even if it was $22 trillion, it's not enough.
Say her name. Say her name. Say her name.
Next speaker.
Say her name. Say her name.
Waukesha Wilson. This is Waukesha Wilson, my baby, my only child. You spoke about restructuring the jails. You didn't mention nothing about putting cameras inside the cells where you could see them. It's 22 minutes missing of that tape where they killed my baby, and nobody has an explanation. I'm still confused. I'm fucked up because I don't know how anybody on this commissioner board can come to a conclusion that she killed herself when you have 22 fucking minutes missing. How can you determine something? How can you come to a conclusion? You don't have all the facts. Those 22 missing is where Officer Rihanna Braden killed my baby, and you cut it out. You allowed them to cut it out. What the fuck happened to it? It just up and disappeared, erased itself? Hell no. Hell no. Do something. Reopen the case. Find out what happened to those damn 22 minutes. I need to know. I still can't sleep at night. Inspector General, please reopen the case. Investigate. Find out what happened to those 22 minutes. That was my only child. My only child. And I'm still hurting like it as if it was today. This morning it happened. You know, I can't even get out of my bed days because I miss her calling me or me calling her. I can't even tell my baby happy birthday, hug her and kiss her. I can't tell her Merry Christmas, Happy Mother's Day, because she was a mother of a 13-year-old son when she was killed. He wants to know what happened to his mother. He did want to be a police officer, but now he has no trust in him because he tells me he sits in a corner in the dark with a tear in his eye for his mom. Now, what am I supposed to say?
Would you like to take your full 2 minutes for your public comment and add it on here? Okay, we'll do that.
What am I supposed to tell him? He'll be 16 in November. He still asks me, Grandma, did they ever show you the 22 minutes? Because if they did, I want to see. Because I want to see him. That's what he said. He said, I am my mom. I am Waukesha Wilson. As I am Waukesha Wilson. She's in here with us. Please find those 22 minutes. Somebody know what happened to him. Talk to Officer Braden. She was fired for what? Not for something she had did wrong in the prior to my daughter's case, but for something she did that day. And that was breaking her neck, beating her, or strangling her, and then gonna make it like it was suicide when they erased what really happened. My baby didn't kill herself. She told me she was gonna call me back so she could talk to her son, so she could talk to her auntie, so she can talk to the family. She told me to be sure to be in court so I can pick her up because she thought that she was being released. So why would she take her own life? Why? And then the mental status, okay, she had some kind of issues, but she told the people there, the nurses and everybody, the staff, that she was had mental health issues. Why didn't they assess her the right way? Why did the Officer Braden move her from one cell to another isolated cell? That's where they killed her at. Isolated, where nobody's there. They killed her there. That's why they isolated her. Why was this officer really fired? Why wasn't I told?
Okay, thank you very much.
No, fuck you. Why wasn't I told she was moved? Why wasn't I told Officer Braden was fired? Why didn't that be public notice? Why wasn't that public information? Why did I have to find out through an investigator? Can somebody come up with an answer to that? I don't understand. I don't understand. How can you guys sleep at night? Say your name. Why can't you Wilson? How can you sleep at night? That's all I want to know. 22 minutes missing. And nobody can tell me what happened to him, who erased them. Nobody. But you all came up with a conclusion that she killed herself. With facts. Missing. You don't have all the facts.
We're very, very sorry. I know we are very sorry for your loss. And with some of these things, we couldn't talk about it because they're confidential personnel matters. Ma'am, confidential personnel matters. It's state law. We can't talk about it. Now, with respect to the footage and the cameras, there's a reason why it was identified in the Inspector General's report. It has actually been something that the department has requested for several years from the city to fund more cameras throughout our jails. And it is something that we all view as being a priority, and we're trying to find the money to do it.
You put the money in the police department, put it in the jails where they can have cameras, where people can see what's going on with their babies.
And with respect to the 22 minutes, we're certainly troubled that that 22 minutes was missing. But as you know, there was footage of your daughter alive after the 22 minutes.
After the 22 minutes.
So there was a lot of footage. There was a lot of footage post that.
How do we know that? How do I know that? Give me some kind of proof that those 22 minutes was erased before she died. Hello? Let me know that.
Okay, we do have proof, but
Let me have it. Give it to me. She deserves that. I need to see that.
The mother
Let
needs
me
to see
know
that. That's all right.
That's what I need to know.
Will you call the next speaker, please?
Say her name.
Waukesha Wilson.
Say her name.
Waukesha Wilson.
Thank you. The next speaker, please, Paula Minor.
Say her name.
The next speaker, please, Paula Minor. And we do have two other cards that were on the way up, sir. The Red Chief Hunt and Pastor Q.
That's fine.
Black Lives Matter and our other allies and partners stand with Waukesha Wilson's family to request that during that 45-day period that you're going to look at your recommendations and come back here with additional or firmer recommendations, that you also look and reinvestigate what happened with Waukesha Wilson. We understand that the reason this should be reopened is because information came out that was not presented to the family, that was not presented to this commission after they told the family that the issue was settled. We know that the officer involved with Waukesha Wilson's murder was being considered going through the termination process, and because of her union, it took longer to resolve it. But she was fired after after Chief Beck said the case had been settled. That information came out not because it was private, it came out from a TV investigative reporter and was on Channel 4. You all know that. It wasn't like he couldn't get it. It wasn't like he violated any rules to get it. So we believe during that 45 days you need to re-look at what happened, because it's very serious. And this individual was fired for her negligence, and that she had a record of prior incidents of negligence in caring for inmates. So if you're really going to look at what's going on in the jail, you need to look at those things. You really do.
And after they found out, they knew she had...
Next speaker, please. May we have the next
The
speaker?
Red Chief.
Who's the next speaker?
The Red Chief Hunt.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. The Red Chief Hunt. I like you guys' report because it misses the objective. Mental health therapists should be over at that jail evaluating people. Number one, in any jail, because that jail is outdated and barbaric. I was in there, and I really got fucked up in that jail myself. So I really understand. Then lawsuit is still pending, so I understand how she feels. But that jail is outdated and barbaric. You guys ain't never talked about a mental health provider over there to evaluate these people to make sure that they don't get hurt. If you go to jail and you're under arrest, the city of Los Angeles is supposed to protect you, not hurt you. She came out something else. And then you guys didn't even tell her right away what was going on. She said that's what makes you guys look guilty automatically. And like I said, it's a forensic report that'll show everything that happened to her if you hire Barry Scheck or somebody like that. And the city doesn't have that kind of money, but it'll tell the truth at the end. You guys really need to respect that. And Michael Moore, you need to change that jail. You need to change everything in that jail. It's outdated. You need to put rooms for everybody so don't nobody get hurt. Everybody can look after another there. Nobody needs to be in a single cell by themselves. That's outdated. Listen, I was over there. I got hurt. And it's still pending. I can't talk about it, but it's still pending. I got hurt in there. There's no mental health providers. There's nothing in there. And they don't talk about that in their report. A psychotherapist need to be over there evaluating everybody that's over there. That if you do an intake, they need to go see a psychotherapist. Thank you, the Red Chief Hunt.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Pastor Q.
We're talking about mental health. We're talking about murder.
Pastor Q. And then who do you have after Pastor?
That is the last speaker on this item.
Okay. Sir?
Good morning, Pastor Q from the Church Without Walls and CLUE Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. I would like to read a passage from the scripture that says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope." We are haunted by 22 minutes of a video. We are haunted by the mistrust of the police department. Our people mourn like those who have no hope because we can't trust anything you guys say. These incidents bring a sense of hopelessness that black lives don't matter. More cameras will not bring Waukesha Wilson back. Mr. Matt Johnson, they had a video. And even when you guys have the video, you don't show us the video. We are demanding that you guys reopen the case. We know that information came out in the media after Waukesha Wilson's mother. You've had opportunity to speak to her on several occasions. None of that information was relayed to her. As a matter of fact, it seemed like it was a cover-up. And so, all of a sudden, now we're doing we have a new inspector general who does not have a background, who doesn't understand the past year we've been coming in this police commission, and now they're bringing recommendations. That's why I always say, this system is flawed by design, can never be just to black people. There are exceptions, but not the rule.
There are no other comment cards on this item, sir?
Okay, there's no action on this item. Let's move to item number 2B, the department's presentation regarding the mentoring programs. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chief and members of the Commission. My name is Tony Carranza. I'm the Captain of In-Service Training at the Police Academy. Throughout the years, the Department has had various mentoring programs. In the autumn of 2017, the Department formed the Employee Development Task Force with the goal of revising and expanding the opportunities for career development. The task force is headed by Commander Martin Bays of Police Sciences and Training Bureau. The task force is comprised of numerous employee groups, including the Command Officer Association, the Protective League, OJB, LAPOA, LAY, and the Law Enforcement of Asian Pacific Islanders. The objectives were identified as the following: establishment and support of the mentor program, increasing of job opportunities, limiting coveted tour assignments, provide training for promotional process, and establishing networking opportunities for employee organizations. In November of 2017, the employee groups were solicited for information regarding their suggestions and input regarding the mentoring program. In January of 2008, Police Sciences and Training Bureau began accepting applications for both sworn and civilian supervisors and command officers to become department mentors. The program was reestablished with the Career Development Unit as the point of contact. An awareness campaign was conducted through the department commands by way of the direct reports meeting through the Chief of Police. Currently, there are 34 department mentors. The Employee Development Task Force continues to meet approximately every 6 weeks. The task force has numerous proposals which they are debating to determine if they were implemented would benefit the department and the mentorship program. These proposals include coveted positions be limited to tour assignments to provide more opportunity to more employees, enforcing the current limited tour assignments, a department survey employees regarding their desires of mentors, having a mentee assigned a specific mentor. Due to the limitations of the Career Development Unit, which is one sergeant and a management analyst, have the mentorship program be assigned to Personnel Division. Develop specifics regarding mentorship, such as what is the requirement, steps to be taken to be a mentee or a mentor, how often should they meet, is it specifically designed for promotional process, sworn or civilian. Should there be a training curriculum involved? Should mentorship be allowed on department time? Should be modeled such after the peer support program? Should there be a bifurcation between sworn and civilian employees, as their career paths are often quite different? The task force has scheduled a network mixer for August, sponsored by LAPOA. This mixer will have a keynote speaker modeled after TED Talks about leadership and provide employees the opportunity to meet command staff whom they may not normally be in a position to meet, greet, and view as potential mentors. This concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Questions?
So when is the next meeting? Not the mixer, but next meeting?
It's yet to be determined, but it should be when Commander Biza comes back from his vacation.
Okay. So with the outreach, there were only 34 mentors that were identified. That's obviously an organization of 10,000 sworn and another 2,000 to 3,000 civilian. That's just going to barely scratch the surface. I think there's a need to have mentorship programs on both the sworn and civilian side, so we should look at that. And we also have to look at how we get a much more expanded group of mentors.
Yes, sir.
In terms of the next meeting, if I could, I've attended one. I would, if I can attend the next one, I will. So if you could make sure that I'm on the invite list, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir, we'll do.
Any other questions, comments? Do we have any public comments? I'm sorry.
Just a brief statement.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see
A brief
it.
statement,
Jump in.
Commissioner. George Villegas from Office of Administrative Services. And I believe you've collaborated with Chief Moore, and there's going to be a reorganization. Part of the reorganization within the department is to specifically address mentorship and all those issues that Captain Carranza discussed. So we'll go into further detail at that next meeting. We'll go into the metrics of and the specific goals from job sharing to specifically mentors, as well as the success of moving the Los Angeles Women's Police Officers Association and the police department's annual women's conference to a more national conference as well. So we'll get into further details then.
Great. Have you identified a speaker for the mixer?
I believe it's being selected by LaPoa, sir.
Okay.
Commissioners, what I'd like to do is, why don't we, Chief Villegas, why don't we write back at our next report, why don't we do it in writing, and we can update this group, update the commission here in about, I would say, 75 days, and let's identify the actual measures that we're wanting to accomplish and commit ourselves to.
Great. Thank you.
Do we have any public comments on 2B?
We have none, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to item number 2C, the community survey results.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I'm Deputy Chief Sean Malinowski, now Chief of Detectives for the Los Angeles Police Department. This is a community survey project that was started when I was the Chief of Staff 2 years ago and continues today. And so I would like to thank the subcommittee, Commissioners McLean Hill and Commissioner Murphy Goldsmith, for your guidance on this, and also for challenging us to be more self-critical when it comes to looking at these results. So it's very easy to look at the results of the survey and kind of pick and choose the things that we think are positive out of it, but it's harder to look at where we have problems. But that's the whole point of it, is to look at this, get a snapshot every year, try to do better in terms of more often, doing surveys more often and doing a deeper dive, and then making improvements. So I just would like to go through the point of the survey and what we were able to achieve this time. So if you recall, 2 years ago, we were able to reprogram some grant money to do the initial survey, and we got results back. And then it took us some time to get into the budget cycle, which we did. And then it took us some time to get through a procurement. So there was, instead of a 1 year gap, there's a 2 year gap in the survey results. The point of the survey was to focus on gauging the public's fear of crime, the public's trust in the LAPD, and the public's satisfaction with the service provided by the LAPD. In this particular survey methodology, we had 22 questions asked in approximately an 11-minute interview across 1,602 respondents. We divided it among the 4 LAPD geographic bureaus based on population, and we oversampled also in Newton, Southeast, Southwest, and 77th Division, which we did last time also, to gauge, go a little deeper into that. As far as the results themselves, you'll see there are some increases or some improvement on overall satisfaction and some numbers that we get overall. So for instance, 78% of the respondents are approving that either approve or strongly approve the job that LAPD is doing. That's up slightly from last time. I won't belabor these numbers. There's 82% of respondents that either agree or strongly agree that LAPD treat residents in a fair and courteous manner, and you have the rest of the results. And so I won't go over all of those results. I think the thing that is most interesting, or where we can start looking at work that has to be done,
What's that survey take?
is in when it comes to three questions. The question of LAPD treats people of all races and ethnicities fairly.
Right.
The question of officer use of force when absolutely necessary, and the question of does LAPD stop and search too many people. So these are the three. These are the three answers that we have disparities.
If you want to fill out a card and come up and speak, that's great. If you want to interfere or disrupt the meeting to the current speaker, that's not allowed. Go ahead.
So we do have disparities between ethnicities when it comes to these three questions. On the issue of LAPD treats people of all races and ethnicities fairly, what you'll see is overall, you have 54% of the respondents agreeing with that. But when you go to African American community, it's down to 40%. And Hispanic community is trending about the same as overall at 56%. On this issue of officers use force only when necessary, there's a big difference. When you look at overall, you're at 55% people agreeing that LAPD only uses force when necessary. Only 28% of the black community feels that way. And finally, the question on stop and search, which is an issue that we continually look at, both use of force and stop and search. This question was worded in a way that, do you agree or disagree with the statement, LAPD stops and searches too many people? What you'll see in that is that 39% of the African American community believe that we stop too many people versus 24% of the overall population. So clearly, and you have all of the data in the report, and this is something that when we look at it, we want to cut right to the point. And the point is there's work that has to be done on community engagement, improving these measures. And we're committed to doing that, and we're looking for better ways to do it. We realize there's limitations when you're only talking to 1,600 people once a year. So if we've discussed some ideas about how to do that using technology, and I know the chief is supportive of that. And we're going to try to do the same thing we're seeing in other cities, in New York and Chicago and here. So maybe we can start comparing results across the country. So those are the highlights, and I have Dr. Yoshida here if there's specific questions about methodology or anything else.
I don't have questions about methodology. I do have a question about roadmaps. And I think that the three areas that you talk about are each worthy of a presentation in the near future of what is our roadmap to improve perception. What is our checklist? What are we going to do specifically? And then we'll see what the other survey comes back. So the survey are the facts. The facts of the survey are the facts of the survey. How we deal with the facts of the survey are what's important. And so the question is, how are we going to address each of these? What are we going to specifically do? And I think that they're each worthy of a report at a future time once you create that roadmap. So I'd ask the chief and you guys to take a look. Other questions, comments?
Hello?
I'm sorry.
First, I again appreciate, as I did 2 years ago, the department undertaking the this proactive measure of actually documenting in some fashion public sentiment. As you know, when we discussed, I was not optimistic that simply asking the same questions would get a different result. And, and I want to not be discouraged by the fact that we have seen really statistically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say statistically no significant movement in a positive direction in those areas where the survey indicates there is a significant lack of public trust and a high degree of dissatisfaction. And those areas are serious. I do want to, as I did, nearly 2 years ago, year and a half ago, take issue with the notion or any suggestion that this measures perception devoid from people's actual real experience, because that does not help us. We have to, as a department, be prepared to embrace the notion that what is reflected here is evidence of and strongly mirrors the experience of policing in certain neighborhoods and directed at certain individuals. That said, and I'm cognizant of Commissioner Sobroff's statements, that said, I am encouraged and highly supportive of the both initial steps that have been taken by Chief Moore, and do believe that this department can, with renewed focus, with significant effort, and a willingness to listen more than we speak, along with and aligned with training, engagement, and the goodwill of the community that's affected, because this is not an area that we can address by ourselves, that we can see change reflected in surveys of this nature and in other measurements. So, I agree that it does us very little good to belabor the numbers, and want to simply, I think, say just a little bit about or respond just a little to one of the comments that was made in the last session, the last public speaking session, and it just goes to hope. In the absence of hope, there's no possibility of progress or change. And so, notwithstanding sometimes deep disappointment, and not speaking to any specific incidents or any specific action, notwithstanding deep disappointment, I would urge us all to maintain hope. And not only hope, I know that on this board and on this dais, there is both hope and commitment. So that's all I have to say about this, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I echo my colleagues' comments. Thank you for your work on this. It's a long time coming, and obviously a top priority for me as well as other members of the commission. And, I think a testament to the department's commitment to transparency and to having these hard conversations and prioritizing these issues. And although it is disappointing, and I understand how it might make people feel hopeless, I agree that facing it head on and tackling it in a serious way with resources and leadership from the chief and others and the commission is the right thing to do, and certainly gives me hope. And just echoing Commissioner Soboroff's question, I too, of course, would want to see a robust plan going forward to address these issues and to understand how that compares to what's already been done. I know the department has been doing a number of things over the years to change these experiences, and maybe the department has some metrics that are separate from this about the degree to which those have worked, what works, what isn't, and then going forward, what's going to be different, knowing that at least by this metric, we still have a lot of work to do. So understanding fully what that plan is.
Okay. Other comments? Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, sir. We have 6 comment cards.
Okay.
The first 3, Jamie McBride, Audrey George, and Jamie Garcia.
Morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Commissioners and Chief Moore. My name is Jamie McBride. I'm a director of the Los Angeles Police Protective League, which represents nearly 10,000 officers that serve the communities within Los Angeles. We are extremely pleased by the results of the community survey, which validates the good work and professionalism by Los Angeles police officers. This survey provides a voice to those unable to attend these weekly meetings and have their opinions expressed, and the results are positive. 78% of Angelenos approve of the job LAPD is doing. And good morning to the 22%. 73% of the residents feel that LAPD is responsive to their concerns. 67% of the residents believe LAPD does a good job interacting with the community. 82% of the residents believe that LAPD officers treat residents in their neighborhoods fair and in a courteous manner. The majority of residents believe officers only use force when absolutely necessary. 73% of the residents believe Los Angeles police officers are honest and trustworthy, and 84% believe that officers conduct themselves in a professional manner. The results of the scientific survey of all Angelenos allow Angelenos and the Commission to evaluate the overall community's perception of local policing and look for areas to improve. The LAPPL remains committed to working with you to build on these results and to strive for safer streets and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Audrey George.
Get him out of here.
Okay, so Professor Abdullah, this is not public comment, and this is not time for you to just disrupt the meeting over and over. So I will give you this as your last warning. If you continue, if you continue to speak out when other people are speaking, it's their turn. If you continue to speak out while I'm speaking, I'm going to ask you to leave. Go ahead.
So when you are considering a report, which was a sham invented to spin opinions on the LAPD, you can not approve it. You can refuse to approve it. This is just strictly to get funding sustained for the laser program. They're looking for evidence that people aren't feeling safe in their neighborhoods, even though the reason that they're not feeling safe in their neighborhoods is because of laser. This is a conflict of interest, which is one of the main reasons you should not approve this. How can you keep soliciting opinions for subject matter experts who are the ones who will be monetarily incentivized if you continue the laser program? How can you let them write the survey? How can you let them choose the population of the survey, which is not representative in general of our communities? Many of whom do not own a phone, who do not rent or own a home, and who are not gender binary. This conflict of interest is, it's so obvious. Anyone who studies public policy, anyone who studies politics or law knows that this would just totally cause you to disregard and reject this report. The report doesn't discuss the fact that there are still huge discrepancies in how white people and black people respond. Only 24% of black respondents said that they feel that the LAPD treats residents with fairness and courtesy. Only 28% of black Americans in this community said
Next speaker, please. You can come back during public comment.
The next speaker,
Michelle.
Jamie Garcia, please.
Garcia?
So I think it's interesting that we start with looking at policing through the eyes of transparency and perception. So that speaks to me and to everybody else in the room that it's really not about substance and about what you're actually doing. Policing is racist, it's violent, it has its history in slavery, segregation, and again, violence. So we put it into context, and Audrey did a great job bringing up LASER, and this is part of the LASER contract that Justice, Security, and Strategies, who is paid to operationalize LASER, to audit LASER, now to survey the community in regards to how the community feels in regards to safety. Well, they talked about looking at 77th Division, Southwest Division, Southeast Division, and Newton Division, which they wanted to pull from specifically. But specifically, those divisions were looked at because there was this spike in crime, right? But what wasn't talked about is A, LASER wasn't brought up in this survey and how it's connected, but B, how the community safety operations centers were also created at that time. And they were created at that time because they wanted to target that area. And so I bring this up because it starts with criminalization. We see a problem, and so we criminalize that area. When we think about Newton, we think about 77th, we think about Southwest, Southeast Division, there's a lot of poverty going on. So we don't start with what does that community need, and you were out in the community more, talking to Boyle Heights, talking to them about what are the needs in the community, how you want to turn around the LAPD, but we don't start with what do the community's needs. Do they need more schools? Do they need more money? Do they need more healthcare facilities? Do they need these things? But instead what we're implementing is more programs to criminalize. And so you set up these CSOCs, and they're like mini fusion centers. And I'm sure Sean Malinowski is very aware of that because he helped to institute them. So now you're gathering all this data, you're figuring out who to put on these secret lists, and you're going out and you're harassing and targeting them. Because we know, regardless of how your statistics say about how the community's feeling about policing, that you're stopping black people, 2017, 5 times more than you're stopping white people.
Thank you. You can come back during public comment and finish your comments.
The next speaker, please,
Next speaker,
Victor
please.
Trujillo.
Who's the next speaker?
Victor Trujillo.
Victor? Morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Victor Trujillo. I was behind a law that was called AB 1909, had it passed because I was discriminated for a government employee falsifying police reports since I was a child. In 1977, I was thrown in the street at the hospital. I made a police report with Internal Affairs, and it had to do with LAPD. And in 1982, I was arrested leaving a church, and my charges were not dropped. Then in 1987, I was arrested for a home invasion in my own house. I took out a biker and his wife, and the guy that was behind them to kill me with the knife was my little brother. He was hired by LAPD. In 1989, LAPD had my brother murdered. I had a kite from a guy. I got a gun from a sheriff in Palmdale that told me, "You want your mother alive?" About 4 months later, it's documented on Daily News. My mother was gunned down. Before they went to gun down her, they gunned down me at the house. I had a shootout with these men. One of the men took off. He's a free man. In 2011, I meet him in the county jail. He actually tells me he's supposed to kill this guy in jail. I was in a coma 3 times in LA County Jail. In Los Angeles. And everybody's like, whoa, I was blessed. I met the guy that went to kill my mother. But now this guy tells me specifically how he killed my brother. And I try to make a police report, no one ever helped me. So I went to talk to Kermer, detective from Internal Affairs. He's scared to death to do my report. He tells me, you know what, I can't help you. You know, you hate police officers. I was an educated man. In 87, I was going to be a professional baseball player. I lost my career because I got in a home invasion, was in my own house, taking care of my house, and the guy that went to kill me was hired with snitches to take me out. I beat the shit out of him. I go to jail for that. In 1993, I get out of prison, and the cop that arrested me, his name was Miller, he arrests me, puts a gun to my head, and I tell Mrs. Pettis, she saves my life. I go to a hearing in LA County Jail, and I actually, Mr. Miller, I said,
Thank you, sir. May we have the next speaker, please? Who's the next speaker?
Mr. Novak?
Mr. Novak?
Yeah, it's symptomatic that you find a report that shows a discrepancy in people's perceptions of the police, and you want to figure out how to massage that so to improve their perceptions. Perceptions are based on realities. The reality you have to deal with. Mr. Johnson, you said you modeled yourself on John Mack. John Mack was not an entertainment attorney. He was a civil rights leader. He spent his career trying to achieve equality for black people in the city and to educate people about the problem of racism. If there's a discrepancy between the perceptions that white people have and black people have of the police, it's the responsibility of the police commission to educate white people to eliminate their white blind spot about the nature of policing in this city. And that's particularly on the white members of this board. Mr. Sobroff, look up, please, and Ms. Goldsmith. You have a responsibility to educate people about what the realities of policing are in the city so that white people are not confused about the nature of policing and not satisfied with the kind of policing that goes on in the city, because that's racist, and that empowers and encourages the police department to carry out the kind of protection of white supremacy and exploitation and oppression that goes on in the city. So if you want to fulfill your responsibilities as police commissioners, I would advise you to start to do that, to educate people about why those perceptions exist based on the reality of what kind of policing goes on in the city. And I think that I've told you before over and over again that the question of community-oriented policing is seen in the police departments as the domestic equivalent of psychological operations in the military. It's part of militarized policing, and it's a method of trying to control the thinking of the population or the so-called enemy. And the police department here in this city sees black people and brown people as the enemy, or the police commission tries to move those over into being the people whose thinking is controlled by the police commission. You have to turn this whole thing on its head, and you can start by getting rid of the chief you just hired.
Yeah.
And the next speaker, Melina Abdullah.
So first of all, with regard to the report, you all need to, if it's a report that you're actually proud of or believe in, there should be hard copies available to the public, right? So for us to not be able to follow along with the verbal presentation of the report is hugely problematic. I'm going to also ask if we could repeat those disparities. I have the disparities in terms of the use of force, but not the ones in terms of stops and racial fairness that you mentioned. So maybe when my time is up, if the person giving the report can give us those statistics again. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. And then I also want to encourage you to think about not these flowery kind of glowing views of what LAPD is for the most affluent and the most privileged in our community, but we need to think about the way LAPD operates in black, brown, and poor communities, right? And so your report really needs to elevate the problem areas, and you need to be asking the community what they want to be the remedy, not come up with a plan around perception, because as Commissioner McClain-Hill raised, this is not a matter of perception. These are actually the lived experiences of those communities. There was an additional report that was generated by Community Coalition that I hope that you've all read. In that report, 77% of South LA residents would give LAPD a D or an F. 77%, right? And so we need to think about what's happening in the community. What are the experiences of those communities and their solution? The solution that's given in that People's Power report is that the dollars spent, and this is specifically for Chief Moore, should not be going into more policing, but specifically into
Okay, so do you want to restate the statistics?
Yes, I will. On the three questions, the first question being LAPD treats people of all races and ethnicities fairly. The overall results was 54% agree, For the African American population, that was 40%. For the Hispanic population, it was 56%. And for the white respondents, it was 55%. On the question, officers use force only when absolutely necessary, the overall results were 55% agree. The respondents, African American respondents were 28%, Hispanic respondents 62%, and white respondents at 56% to that question. On the question of does LAPD stop and search too many people? Overall, 24% agreed with that. 39% disagreed in the black community, and 34% disagreed. So because it's a weird wording of the question, just to be clear about it, does LAPD stop and search too many people? Or LAPD stops and search too many people? You had overall 62% disagreeing with that, 48% in the black community, 53% in the Hispanic community disagree.
And Mr. Teefank, about making the report available to the public, can you explain where it is and how people can get copies of it?
Yes, sir. As all of the documents, the report is available at two places. First, it's at LAcity.org. If you go to meetings, and then you click on public meetings, it would be there for the day with all of our agenda items. It's also available on lapdonline.org, and the commission agendas are posted, hyperlink right to the report.
Yeah, we'll have them out at the next meeting. We'll have some hard copies out.
And reports like this, it actually would be a good idea to put up on the screen as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for
that. I sort of thought it was.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just as the folks are leaving, I'd like to just note that I'm always excited when we have both members of the community and members of representatives from the PPL looking at the same report and finding information that is of note and important to them. And I do want to reiterate that the presenters did seek to focus on the areas not where we have reason to be pleased with the outcome, but on areas where we did not. And then finally, just for me, I want to just note that this department can do better than 55% in those three areas that were just noted. We can, and I'm confident that we will. It's a pretty significant situation where you have fewer than 60% of those surveys believing that we treat everyone fairly or that we use force only when necessary. That is an abysmal number, regardless of who's being asked. And so, things aren't perfect, but the first step is identifying where we stand and then taking action to see how we do better. So I appreciate this report. Thank you.
Were there other public comments, or was that the last?
It's the last one, sir.
Okay. May we have a motion for recommendation for a motion for approval of the department's report? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Let's go to the next item, please. Item number D.
Item number D, Department's report dated July 10, 2018, relative to the Department's response to the Board of Police Commissioners' request unbiased policing reduction efforts.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Teefank, Chief Moore, Inspector General Smith. I'm Bob Arcos from the Office of Operations. I'd like to introduce, up at the table with me is Deputy Chief Debbie McCarthy from Professional Standards Bureau and Lieutenant Adrian Gonzalez from the Office of Operations, who works closely with soon-to-be Deputy Chief Chris Pitcher from the back office of operations. Also, I'd just like to acknowledge the collaborative work that went behind this report from PSB, from Police Science and Training Bureau, from the Office of Operations, from the Office of the City Attorney, and from Commissioner McLean Hill and Commissioner Shea Murphy Goldsmith. Thank you for your guidance and recommendations throughout this process. This report speaks to one of the highest priority items for our commissioners, our chief of police, and for our department, a focused, collaborative, and sustainable bias policing reduction effort. A perception of biased policing undermines community trust and negatively impacts our ability to do our job. However, when the public sees that we are quickly and fairly addressing complaints and have integrated training and retraining mechanisms, we build trust and create stronger relationships with our communities. This report lays out plans for improved tracking, training, and reiteration of the message that not only is biased policing never acceptable, we can also do more to reduce the perception of biased policing through communication, empathy, emotional awareness, as well as leveraging supervisory engagement to ensure complaints are identified and addressed quickly. So we're at the table here. We're prepared to answer any questions on this report, Commissioners.
Okay. Commissioner Goldsmith, Commissioner McLean-Hill. Commissioner Goldsmith, want to start?
Sure, thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the work of the department and its many partners, including inputs from the City Attorney's Office Dispute Resolution Program. And also want to note that this report reflects additional ongoing work that will be done, is being done in response to profound questions asked by Commissioner Goldsmith at the last time that this item was before us. It is our strong view that beyond merely identifying and tracking complaints related to bias, that the way to move forward is to address them and to provide and to promote opportunities for members of the public to work with and to specifically raise their concerns with members of this department in a fashion that is both controlled, that is fair, that allows both parties to express themselves and to hopefully arrive at a conclusion that is satisfactory to both. I think the department has really gone a long way toward rethinking the way that we handle these complaints so that it's not a year later or 6 months later that we're looking at a long list of undetermined or unfounded items, but really to be far more proactive. I appreciate that. I am happy and interested in the broader presentation and just want to again say thank you and to indicate that I'm incredibly happy with the degree to which you have worked to meet my concerns and my expectations around this item.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldsmith.
Yeah, thank you very much for your leadership on this. Obviously, constitutional policing and fair policing is a top priority for all of us, and addressing the issues that this work addresses are critically important to us. And I really think that you all went above and beyond here in taking very seriously the questions that we raised and coming up with really creative recommendations. And particularly want to thank Commissioner McLean-Hill for her leadership and really rolling up our sleeves and getting in there to figure out what can really be done differently going forward, so that we've all grown weary of the quarterly reports on racial bias and want to address the underlying issues. And I think this does represent creativity, collaboration, and really a proactive approach by everyone involved. And in particular, I think although it's not specifically identified as such in the report, that really focusing on procedural justice for employees of the department as well as community members is critically important, as you said, to improve trust and actually reform our practices so that we are trustworthy, and also restorative justice. And I think the value of bringing people together who have been in a conflict and having them look in each other's eyes and face each other and face the harm that was done, whether it was intended or not, and understand the other person's perspective and be open to changing their own behavior as a result, I think is transformative. And regardless of the particular findings in a case, that exercise can be beneficial to everyone involved. And I appreciate the department's efforts to strongly encourage and incentivize employees to participate in the program, and I hope they find it as transformative as it's intended to be, and of course hope the same for members of the community.
Okay.
The only comment I wanted to make was I thought the report was great too, and I think this is the right direction for us to be headed. There were several people that had multiple complaints over a period of time, even though most of those complaints, or maybe even all those complaints, were unfounded. The fact that so many people took the time to file a complaint when most officers, may get one or none over the course of their career, that they had so many, it tells me that they're doing something wrong. There's something about how they're interacting with people that is not right. And I think even if it's not rising to the level of bias or some other offense that warrants discipline, they do need some kind of counseling about how they're interacting with our citizens. That the interactions are going in a different direction.
We agree, and that's one of the reasons we think mediation is so valuable, because we've had cases where people come in and the officer may not understand how their body language comes across, or why what they're saying could be offensive. And in so many of the instances, they've said, gosh, I had no idea, I just didn't know I did that. So by increasing mediation, even beyond bias, but to lower level misconduct, that would be our goal. So if we get supervisors specifically trained in the area of mediation, our hope is that will translate in so many parts of their job, whether it's just to escalate or to de-escalate situations, or whether it's to kind of pave the way and show officers what it looks like in terms of how to mediate disputes or how to talk to people in general. So we think that by training these supervisors, it will translate into so many different areas, in addition to taking it beyond just bias, but to lower levels of misconduct, so that we can have those one-on-one connections and those one-on-one interactions. And it's one person at a time, but that's where we need to start. We need to start one person at a time, step by step, baby steps, and hope that they go back and that they share their positive experiences with their friends and families. The results of the mediation have been quite good, with the satisfaction being high on both sides. With us today is Shoffin Roberts. Shoffin is the director of dispute resolution, the dispute resolution program for the city attorney. And we have Rhiannon Talbert, who's in charge of mediation, and her supervisor, Kathy Haskins. They've done a great job of trying to get people in, making the locations of the mediation, weekends, nights, places that are convenient for both sides, to try to get people in to have those face-to-face contacts. I believe last year we had 6 year-to-date. So far we've had 23. Great. So in addition to everything we've recommended in the report, and thank you again for your guidance on this, I think we're going to see a lot of improvement.
Do either of you have any comment? Do either of you have any comments? You want to say anything? You good? Okay.
Actually, I did have a couple of things just on, because in addition to the mediation, there's a lot in here about training, but just on one aspect, one recommendation that's being made here, and there are a number of recommendations that are in place, as we discussed, specifically to lower the barrier from the perspective of both officers and community members to participate in immediate or very near-term direct conversation around matters that have created problems. But I wanted to go to the first recommendation, that regarding the ACR process. And I had given this feedback earlier, it just didn't get addressed here, where we're talking about, and I fully support having this additional option available at the sort of division level to deal with these issues. However, the thing that I'm concerned about is a mediation that would involve only department members and members of the public, as opposed to a intervention at the ACR level, so keeping it in that genre, but that would also have the option of having a mediator present, should that be requested by the community member. And I would like to know if that's something that the department can endorse. I'm very concerned about not just about the integrity of the engagement, and I would be concerned about defending that if the option for an outside mediator were not available to individuals willing to participate in the ACR.
So to answer your question, what our goal is to identify and train specific supervisors. Those supervisors, we met with the city attorney's office yesterday, and those supervisors would not only go through the training, but they would have to sit through actual mediations in terms of certification to say that they're able to do this. So if we're in the field and there's...
No, I understand the goal.
No, and Commissioner, the answer is yes. We'll allow... Yes. There was also, I think the chief was going to go into a conversation with the city attorney's office about trying to get a responsiveness from the city attorney's office that could staff this more quickly.
No, and I do understand that issue as well. So my first question, so if the answer is yes, that in fact, should a community member prefer that there be an outside mediator as opposed to a supervisor, even connected to the ACR resolution, that be honored. That's I appreciate that. And then with respect to, I'm fully aware of the challenges we have with recruiting mediators. And noted that there was a recommendation that we prevail upon the city attorney to invest more into his efforts or into their program. I am also interested and would like to task our Inspector General to look at how he might work with the city attorney's office and augment the recruitment of mediators. I'm not certainly asking you to train or manage, but this is a critical item, and in order to make this work, we do need people that are available on very short notice to that are trained to show up and to support. And so if that is something Mark, that you can commit to, and working with the coordinator of the mediation program, Stefan, who's here, Shepard, who's here, that would be, I think, useful in addition to the other recommendations in the report. Is that something that you can help us with?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and just say it very briefly, the OIG is most certainly supportive of efforts in mediation for all the reasons that have been discussed, and Commissioner McLean-Hill, I think maybe you said it best of all. It's the best opportunity to allow both parties in a concern or issue or conflict at least the opportunity to reach satisfactory conclusions, much more so than I think some of the other processes. So in that spirit, if there's anything that OIG can do to help be supportive, including the way that you mentioned, we're more than happy to do that.
Good, then we'll follow up with the city attorney's office on that.
I'd also like to ask if you could come back in 6 months with a report on your progress and results, and would appreciate the OIG's review and report at that time as well.
Of course.
Okay. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, sir. We have 7 comment cards. We have Mr. Novak, followed by Audrey George and Adam Smith.
This is item 2D.
Yes.
Biased Mr. Sun?
Yeah.
Bias policing reduction efforts. If you want to reduce bias policing, you have to look at it systematically. It's not a question of although I believe in accountability of the individual officers for their implicit or explicit bias or for abuse, but it's not a problem of the individual officers. If you criminalize poverty and you criminalize homelessness, and those are racialized as they are in this city, then you have racialized policing. It's unavoidable. If your police department functions as the LAPD does, as an occupying army in communities of color, excuse me, can I have your attention, please?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Thank you. I'd like my time back also.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not just you, Mr. McLean, it's all of them. If the police department functions as an occupying army in communities of color and as an internal border guard in more privileged areas, then automatically you have biased and racialized policing. If the Constitution of the United States was based on white supremacy, then constitutional policing is not the answer to biased policing. It's not a problem of individual officers, it's a systemic problem. And until you begin to deal with it in that way, you're not going to be able to deal with it at all. It's not a question of perceptions, it is the reality. If you want to reduce biased policing, reduce policing. If you want to reduce deaths in custody, reduce the number of people you put in custody and the length of time you hold them in custody. If you want to reduce police killings, reduce the number of police. It's a simple solution. If you want to deal with the problem of people dying in the jails or the problem of people being killed on the streets, then put the money into housing, into jobs, into education, into drug diversion, and not into the police. If you see, if your only tool is a hammer, you see everything as a nail. If your only tool is a gun, you go around looking for targets. And in this city, the targets are on the backs of black and brown and poor people. And until you deal with that reality, you're not going to deal with the problem. It is not a problem of individual officers and their implicit or explicit bias. It's the mission that you, as the police commission and the city attorney and the mayor and the city council assign to the police department, which is racialized. It's biased in its root. It's to enforce white supremacy, exploitation, gentrification, real estate deals, and you're trying to drive black and brown people into certain areas of the city and then out of those areas of the city. If you're trying to clear black people out of Skid Row, you're going to have racialized policing. It's unavoidable until you deal with the systematic fundamental problems.
Audrey George, please.
As Michael Novick pointed out, you cannot train bias out of police officers who are just part of a system that is based on keeping black and brown people put down, brutalized, murdered. This is the history of policing and the current state of policing. And how are you going to train bias out of police officers when at the core, LAPD truly believes that all of the reports of biased and racialized policing is a perception? How can you train police officers not to be biased when it's the lived reality of black and brown people is dismissed as a perception? How can you train them when even the police commission that is supposed to give oversight over the PD refers to that as perception and totally dismisses the lived reality of people? There is no chance you're ever going to train your PD not to be biased for those reasons and many more. Thank you.
Next speaker, Adam Smith.
Just continuing, it's really troubling. We keep hearing about perception when, like Audrey and Michael Novick said, like this is a historic, systematic problem. In the report, you talk about you're gonna learn the bias out of them with some e-module. They're gonna sit at a computer and like they're not just fucking laughing at that shit and being like, yeah, I'm getting paid for this. You're not going to train that. how can you train bias out of a system through a computer, through someone that's like, sweet, I don't have to drive around today and beat up black people. I can just sit at this computer and pretend I'm doing something. Commissioner McLean-Hill, I know you mentioned, you stated that you appreciated that Detective McBride was here speaking for the union, and also that the community's here to pick out what they don't like. But I want to point out that, I don't know if Detective McBride is still here, but it seems pretty opportunistic that he's here to, applaud this specific thing. But if something doesn't go his way, like a few years ago when he sued and won $1.5 million settlement against the police department, like, can you really take him for being truthful now? It's just kind of laughable, the whole bias policing thing anyway. But, oh, and sorry, everybody that heard my son asking for water. He doesn't understand that the chief can have a coffee and the other folks can have water. I don't know how to explain to a 2-year-old that he's not allowed to have water here, but I apologize if he was loud.
The next speaker, Lisa Hines, followed by Hamid Khan. Hamid Khan.
So the spin is on, and the spin on perception is on. We heard it from supposedly the bench by Soboroff. In this report, Moore goes on to say that the department understands that during a detention or stop of a citizen by an officer, oftentimes is a perception of the citizen. So perception is on. Police Protective League talks about perception. But what continues to miss, and some of you may remember just a couple of months ago we released a report on predictive policing titled Before the Bullet Hits the Body, is the system itself. And we cannot not say it enough times. We've got to keep on saying that. It is inherent in this thing. Bias begins from that. When you have policing programs like suspicious activity reporting, gang databases, gang injunctions, predictive policing, broken windows policing that are based on the presumption of guilt, so bias is inherent in the system. Arcos has been around at Newton Division and 77th. Talk to him about a laser program. Talk to him that why young people are a person of interest. Why are they placed in a chronic offender bulletin? And then they ask for empathy to see, whether they have empathy or not. Well, you're going down the street. The details are in the numbers. When you look at their use of force and the stop numbers, and I think it's really critical that stop becomes important. Remember New York stop and frisk? So over here, their own numbers show that black people are stopped 5 times more than white people on a regular basis, right? So what is that? What is that? I mean, that you expect empathy, you expect people to understand that, okay, I'm being stopped. No, you're being stopped because you're being racialized. You're being racialized, there's a presumption of guilt, there's a whole target attached to you. So unless we truly understand, unless we really dismantle these programs, it's inherent in there. None of these learning modules is going to change anything, and that's where our fight is, because we got to abolish these programs before anything happens.
Ziggy, followed by Victor Trujillo.
Hello. I just want all of you guys to start looking us in the eye when I tell you that you're racist and you're serial killers, because you're killing us, and the level to which you invalidate our lives, even in this room, is ridiculous. We couldn't get a bottle of water in here, and all of you are surrounding us carrying weapons. We couldn't bring something in here to give us life, and every police officer in here has a gun. Are you serious? Are you serious right now? You guys remind me of like the Catholic Church scandal, because, let's say something comes up, you'll just fire the officer and replace it with another one. It's the same fucking thing. It's the same fucking thing. You're not changing the system. It's the system. It's the system. You're congratulating yourselves on a report from within your own fucking group that exposes the racism, and you're like, oh, this is great. But it's even from within your own group. You pay this person off, and it's still, and the invalidation of our life is crazy. You're questioning our perceptions, and what about your guys' perception, I see so much money here on the consent agenda and not 1 cent to Waukesha's family, not 1 cent to community investment, not 1 cent to taking care of anyone but yourselves. The LAPD has 54% of the city budget and somehow can't take care of the city. Somehow you have your hands tied, and I wonder why. Look me in the eyes, I tell you why. Your hands are tied with receipts, and it's racism. You know, they're trying to expand CVE, countering violent extremism, and look me in the eye when I tell you that you guys are the violent extremists. You guys are the ones that are hurting us. You guys are the ones that are terrorizing the city. Look us in the eye as you do that. Don't erase us again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Victor Trujillo again, under AB 1909 that was put together by me, Victor Trujillo, and the governor signed it. It's a law where government lies about they do police reports. I had a police report made, and I
Victor,
actually
this
had
is
it when it was done.
you're not on topic here, so why don't you come back during public comment and do this?
Okay, let me
I
talk
let
to-
you do it once. Just a minute. I let you do it once before. If you want to comment on this specific item, you can do that. Do you know which one this is? I can go
Well,
over it
this
with
is
you.
about police reports, correct?
But this is not about your police report and the
Okay, then
information
we'll
you
talk
just
to-
gave us 10 minutes ago.
I have a situation where a senior citizens in the back, he spent 8 years trying to get a police report. They wouldn't give it to him. I found the organization connected to the street gangs, BACA 13, that works especially with street gangs.
No, this is not on topic, so I'm going to ask you to come back during public comment. Thank you. Next speaker.
All right, then.
We have no other speakers, sir.
Okay. May we have a motion to approve?
I move approval of the report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item number E.
Pushing on it hard.
Does anyone have any questions of the report? Does anyone want to hear the report again? We've read it.
I don't think so.
This is 2E. Yeah, I'd still like you to come up because we're good. If we have public comments,
Okay.
welcome.
We do have one card, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Jonathan Foster.
Ms. Foster, or Mr. Foster?
One E.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct?
2E.
Excuse me. Yeah, 2E. All right. Relative to the department's response to Los Angeles City Council Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity Committee inquiries, I wish they would consider stopping Special Order 40 because it's killed a lot of police officers. It's definitely committed to sex trafficking. I already spoke about that. And I know that there's a large number of people that won't agree with me at all, probably want to throw me under the water and drown me and kill me. But an illegal alien is not an immigrant. Right, they just ignore me. Exactly, irrelevance, yeah. But it's the real problem with all of this is that this is Indian land, and they got killed and genocided into death. Because I'm part Choctaw. So I know that this place is not the United States of America, even though it's operating that way right now. But as it operates right now, it comes in, these people are killing other people.
Yeah.
They
You
really
wanna
are.
go back on topic,
and,
please,
and we
sir?
do know that. What's about the immigrants, right? So that would be great. Special Order 40 is killing a lot of people. Wish it would stop.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval of the report
So moved.
and transmit to the city council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Hey,
opposed?
Commissioners, if I could, just
Chief.
before one of the people at the table leaves, I'd like to recognize the report. Obviously supported in its entirety, but I also want to recognize a man that this will be his last commission meeting after 33 years of service to the Los Angeles Police Department, and that is the Commanding Officer of Operations Valley Bureau, and that is Deputy Chief John Sherman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
I
for
thought
your
the-
years of service to
I
our
read the
city.
report carefully. I sent it to some people. I think it was very well done. Thank you. Item number F, again, I don't think we have any, do we have any comments?
We have
Commission-
two comment cards.
Any commission questions? Let's hear the public comments then.
We have Michael Novick and Adam Smith.
Mr. Novick? Okay, that's good.
That's what you're concerned at.
Okay.
Yeah, this is regarding 2F technology innovation for public safety. Most of the technology innovation I'm aware of is related to programs like laser, like predictive policing, like the use of drones. I think all of the technology innovations that you're introducing over the last several years have nothing to do with public safety or the public good. They're about intensifying surveillance of the population of the city. They're about counterinsurgency policing. They're about militarizing the police force and its capacity to control and track and isolate individuals and to target communities as a whole. I think that you should reject this. I don't understand why it's a 2016 grant and you're still apparently amending and extending it. But I don't think that you should. I think that you should take, the actions you recommend for board action from the department is to approve the department's report and transmit it to the mayor and the city council. And I think that apparently the police commission answers to the police department, because every single report I've ever seen from the police department to the commission recommends that the commission adopt the department's report and transmit it to the city or to the mayor. And every time the police commission unanimously accepts the recommendation from the department to adopt the department's report and send it as its own. So I think that the tail is wagging the dog around here, and it's time that you fulfill your responsibility as police commissioners who set policy and oversee the operations of the department. And instead of transmitting the department's recommendation per their dictates to you, you start dictating to the police department. I think it's time you put a stop to the use of technology for building an architecture of surveillance and treating the people of the city as targets for criminalization.
Adam Smith, please.
I know that the grants for the license plate readers, is that correct? Right. And according to the report, this is for another year of the grant, right? The current one, it says expired in March 2018. So did the department stop using the license plate readers between March 2018 and now, waiting for approval for this grant? How does that work? Or is this just a crock of shit?
Thank you.
Jamie Garcia.
So the TIPS program, Technology Innovation Program, the collection, storage, and sharing of historic crime data. So essentially the legitimization of racist and biased data. So in our report, we talk about crime data, and we talk about how data is political, and we talk about who's collecting the data. So inherently, what does that mean about the data and the attempts to operationalize this data? Because we know that you're doing it through predictive policing programs, through various risk assessments. And that's your attempt to try to become scientific, because you want to be seen in the public health sense that you are, this solution to problems in the community, where many people have come up and say, when you start by criminalizing a problem, you're not a solution to a problem. So by, putting people on heat lists, by putting cars into databases, you're essentially saying, you're the problem, so we're going to extract you from the community, and then we'll make the community healthy. Well, that's not how it works, and that's not a solution, and we're not going to accept it. The issue with the automatic license plate readers, which is very interesting because your friends from the ACLU have wanted to, get a week's worth of automatic license plate readers, and there was a heavy kind of court battle over that. And essentially it was because of the privacy issues, because all this data that you're picking up, how can we release it to the public because this is a privacy issue? But for some reason, it's okay for you to do it. So countless of people, regardless of interfacing with you for any particular reason, are entered into databases, which is highly problematic, which I find laughable because, in so many times when we compare the United States and our freedom and how great we are as a country, and we don't, we're not this like over surveilling country like other countries in Russia, how East Germany used to be. But hence we have databases that are filled with people who have done nothing, have not even interfaced with you besides driving by a car with a license plate. So part of this no cost extension and think.
Thank you. So are there any other comments on this item?
We have no other cards, sir.
Okay. I'm going to move approval of item number 2G. 2F, I'm sorry. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Got it. I'm going to ask you to stop now. You can come back during public comment. If you'd like to speak again, come back during public comment, but not now. It's your last warning. I'm going to ask you to leave the room. She can leave the room. I've asked you to stop disrupting the meeting 3 times. I'm going to ask you to leave the room.
So I suspect that next week we will have a very robust meeting that will address a number of these issues, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
I'm going to ask you to leave the room now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys, de-escalation, de-fucking escalation. This is what it is. This is what it is.
Wait a minute, Steve?
Come on, man. You guys should be saying more. This is what you talked about.
I don't.
This is de-escalation. What do I got? A book and a pen? I got a book and a pen.
I asked you 3 times. And I'm not asking you again. If I say okay now, then I've got to say okay every time, and then we don't have any control over the meetings. So you can leave the room. And if you don't leave the room, then we're going to go into closed session, and no one else will get a chance to speak.
I think she was delayed at the mic.
She was not delayed at the mic.
Because I was talking
I asked her to leave
to her.
before that.
But then I talked to her.
I asked her to leave before you started talking to her. Thank you.
Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Chief's report.
Item
Morning,
number
Chief.
3.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Hi, Chief.
So,
Just really quickly, I know, the Chief, that you're about to give your report, but
Yes.
before you do that, I wanted to say first and foremost how excited and delighted I am to be sitting at the dais with you on your first day at a commission meeting as Chief, and also to congratulate you for your part in making history with the promotion of Regina Scott to Deputy Chief, and certainly I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations to her. It's remarkable that we are still at a time where there are these opportunities, but I was excited to see that and did want to make note of that, as well as to extend congratulations to all of the people that you have promoted as a part of your initial steps with the department. So thank you.
thank you and good morning. And it is truly an honor to be here. And let me just preface by what just occurred. My hopes is that we can have conversations and presentations and public comment in a manner that honors and respects the rules. And this is a commission that is by President Soboroff and his chairmanship of this, and the commissioners govern the conduct of the activity in this room. However, I support that governance, because that governance is necessary if we're going to be successful in many of the efforts and endeavors that many people have come to the podium today to talk about in your pursuit. I join with you, as every member of this organization does, in the pursuit of protecting the rights of everyone in Los Angeles and serving the people of Los Angeles. And we will fall short in that endeavor. And we are going to face criticism, and we're going to face ridicule, and we're going to face manners of conversation and actions that probably no one should have to, but we will. But I want to be clear that in this discord, I'm hopeful to start a new chapter. And that is an effort that not to get rid of the discord, because I think that we all benefit from understanding your reality, your remarks, but also in an effort to where are we going and where are we moving to. And I look forward to taking this organization supported by this Board of Police Commissioners, its Executive Director, its Inspector General, into the 21st century, this next chapter, in a manner that is improved. Now, as to the significant incidents and activities during the last few weeks, I have, with my appointment announced by Mayor Eric Garcetti on the 4th of June, continued my outreach and my efforts to talk with communities, to listen and hear from communities throughout Los Angeles, as well as to conduct conversations and listening posts, if you will, throughout organizations throughout LAP itself, roll call rooms, squad rooms, specialized assignments. And that journey continues, and I hope and look for it to continue for all my days as the chief of this great department. The outreach efforts with those town halls, houses of faith, and vigils have found many people who believe in the work that this department does, but also those that are desirous of us to do things differently, for us to ensure that our actions are respectful of all rights of all involved, and for us not to criminalize matters such as homelessness. And efforts that I believe that are consistent with the department's efforts not to criminalize homelessness or to criminalize people experiencing mental illness or other such circumstances. Internally, I've visited each of the stations across this great city. I've spent time in roll call rooms and in conversations. We've also launched an internal survey to ask every member of the 13,000 people of this organization how their sentiment is, their perceptions of how the department operates, how it treats them, how it holds them in the same in regards to trust and respect. In addition to that, I've made some recent appointments. As Commissioner, you indicated, I was fortunate with my appointment to have the ability to make several promotions. They have been previously announced, but I do want to identify them here as my first commission meeting, that I have appointed Robert Arkos as Assistant Chief over the Office of Operations. He appeared earlier today and spoke on one of the items being presented. And I was also fortunate and chose to promote Deputy Chief, or to the Deputy Chief rank, Regina Scott. Regina was the commander over our technology, and now she will follow Chief Arkos and oversee police operations in the central part of Los Angeles. Also, I've announced the promotion of Commander Chris Pitcher to Valley Bureau. He will be a deputy chief there following the retirement of Deputy Chief John Sherman, who again was here before us today. And also the appointment of 4 commanders. Commander Beverly Lewis, who was previously the captain of West Valley area, and she will be taking the number 2 position in Valley Bureau. Commander Jeff Nolte, formerly the commanding officer of Rampart area, and he'll be assigned to South Los Angeles, working in support of Deputy Chief Dennis Cotto, who's taking over those responsibilities. Commander John McMahon, commanding officer of Use of Force Review Division, being promoted to commander, and he'll assist with with Deputy Chief Regina Scott, and will also be joined by Commander Ruby Flores in the operation of Central Bureau. And finally, Commander Robert Marino, who is commanding officer of Mission Area in the northern part of San Fernando Valley. He will become the assistant commanding officer of Operations West Bureau, where he will join our previous chief of detectives, Deputy Chief Justin Eisenberg, who will now become the Deputy Chief of West Bureau. With these appointments, we also have a series of other realignments of department operations. The effort here is to improve our efficiency, to impact delivery of a number of strategies the department has committed to in its strategic plan, in building public trust and in providing for public safety. I expect that those announcements of those realignments will occur this week and will include some additional captain promotions that will basically build out this organization as we launch into the latter half of summer. In closing, as to my initial remarks, in the sense of the coming into this new assignment, I want to also join this commission in recognizing John Mack as a man who is an institution, a friend of mine that I have known for many years, a mentor, someone who had a significant impact, and as I said some weeks ago, a voice I pray will forever be in my ear for his guidance. A person who challenged this department, and I think someone that we should all look to as a means of how he challenged this department. Because as Mayor Eric Garcetti said so eloquently at his funeral, there are days in which many people speak so loudly and say so little, as compared to those who would speak in more chosen words and a lower voice and say so much. Now, what I'd like to do is move over to two other significant instances in our commitment and previously to report on all officer-involved shootings. I will identify two of those instances that occurred, first occurring on July 6th, just before 7 o'clock at night in the Van Nuys area, the 4700 block of Tyrone Avenue in Sherman Oaks. On that date, Van Nuys patrol officers responded to a radio call after receiving a 911 call from a woman reporting that her son was possibly under the influence of an unknown narcotic and hallucinating. The individual was reported to have thrown items within the residence, was known to have a 10-millimeter handgun and a shotgun inside the residence. We believe that, or according to the woman reporting, we believe the individual was suffering from an unknown mental illness. Officers set up a containment around the residence, meaning we surrounded it, and attempted to open up a conversation or communicate with the individual verbally as well as over a telephone. During the incident, the individual from within the residence raised a handgun and fired it at the officers, and that time it resulted in an officer-involved shooting. SWAT units responded, special weapons and tactics, in an effort to control this situation, and later located the suspect down inside the residence, apparently suffering from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Los Angeles Fire Department responded and declared the individual deceased at the scene. A loaded semi-automatic handgun and a shotgun was recovered from inside the individual's residence. There were no officers, fortunately, that were injured in this event. And Force Investigations detectives responded and handled the administrative investigation and the criminal investigation into this incident, as did members from the Office of the Inspector General, as well as members from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's officer-involved shooting rollout team. The second event occurred the following day on July 7th at approximately 5:10 in the morning, and this occurred in the rear alley of the 6400 block of the Montgomery Avenue in Van Nuys. In that instance, West Valley uniform officers responded to a radio call. The comments of the call indicated that an individual was intoxicated, was feeling suicidal, and had access to a handgun. Numerous West Valley units responded, as did a supervisor. Upon arrival, the officers met with family members who directed the officers to the rear of the location where they believed the individual may have fled to. The officers located the individual in the alley between Gaviola Avenue and Montgomery Avenue and requested additional units, a supervisor, and an airship. An officer, along with family members, communicated with the individual, trying to get him to surrender. The individual armed himself with a handgun and fired at the officers, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. The individual was struck by gunfire. LA County Fire Department personnel responded and transported him to a nearby hospital where he underwent surgery and remains there in stable condition. There were no injuries to the officers or to the individual's family members. A loaded handgun was recovered at the location. Again, in this instance, Force Investigation Division responded and is handling the criminal and administrative investigation, as well as members from the Office of the Inspector General and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. At this point, I'll talk briefly about our crime statistics. Violent crime in Los Angeles continues to be down just under 3%. We're down in each of the violent crime categories with 144 homicides year to date versus 151. We have 70 fewer victims of shootings that's a 12% reduction. And we have 23% fewer victims shot as a result of gang-related shootings. Overall, property crime is down just under 3% at 2.9% reduction for an overall total Part 1 crime reduction of 2.9%. We're challenging, the challenge we have in this area is in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we have seen an increase in our shooting violence, and we have lost some of the margin, some of the reduction that we've seen during the earlier part of this year. We'll continue to look to where the shooting violence is increasing and our efforts to combat that, including our efforts with gang reduction, youth development, our grid resources, in an effort to disrupt or slow down the retaliation that is occurring between a couple of groups of gangs right now that have gone into some shootings back and forth. As far as officer-involved shootings, as of today, we have had 20 officer-involved shootings. That during the same period last year, that number was 30 for a 33% reduction. Of those 20 officer-involved shootings, that has resulted in 9 fatals, and that is the same number. It was 9 fatal officer-involved shootings from last year, so there's been no change there. As for the guns recovered, we have seen an increase of just under 10%, with 3,515 handguns and other firearms recovered as a result of various department actions. In regards to traffic collisions, our hit and run involving fatals is down 17% for A's and K's, which is again the fatals and the serious bodily injury. That's 127 versus 153 for the same period last year. Our motor vehicles versus PED are basically even, with 266 individuals this year being seriously injured, with 58 of them that have lost their life, compared to 267 last year. I'm encouraged there. The one portion, one stat, is that while we lost 58 people this year, pedestrian deaths, last year that number was 73. Still, the new scooters that everybody laying all over the place. Yes, I'm going to address that, Commissioner, in just one moment. Let me finish with the last traffic stat being bicycle stats. And that is our bicycle stats. The numbers are going the wrong direction. Serious injuries and deaths involving bicyclists have increased from 51 last year to date, to 70 this year. Relative to these electronic scooters, there are existing laws that govern their operation on sidewalks and other public areas, and the city is currently working on further statutes that would eliminate or restrict their use in portions of the city, much like other cities are. They pose significant risks to both those that are operating them with or without a helmet, and those that are in the roadway and passageways where people on those scooters frequently find themselves.
Does helmet law apply?
Yes, it does.
It does apply, whether someone's driving on the sidewalk or wherever they are.
Well, they should not be on the sidewalks with those scooters, and as to the helmet law, if they're under 18, I believe they're required to carry it. If they're over 18, they should be required. But I don't believe it's a state law. I'd have to get you more info on that.
Okay.
Next area I'd like to address is the sworn and civilian personnel statistics. We are at 9,972 sworn personnel. That is a reduction from our 10,032 staffing number. We did not have a class in May. We did not have a recruitment class in July in efforts of managing our budget and resources that we have available. However, I expect a full class this next August, this next class coming up, to help restore those numbers. For civilian personnel, we're at 2,972. And for reserves, we have 397. And cadets are just under 1,800.
Okay. Chief, again, congratulations. Thank you, sir. Any
Thank you.
questions?
That concludes my remarks.
Chief, commissioners? Do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir. We have 9 cards.
Okay.
We have Michael Novick, Paula Miner, and Lisa Hines.
Mr. Novick?
That I don't get answers, but I want to put them forward anyway. To Chief Moore, I know that basically statistically, the vast majority of police officers never fire their weapon in the line of duty other than for training purposes and on the range. As someone who has shot 2 people and killed 1, I'm wondering if your personal experience has any impact on your thinking about how to reduce officer-involved shootings to 0, if possible. I know in some of your prior service, you oversaw both SWAT and special operations for the department. I'm wondering, again, if your personal experience leading up to becoming chief has any impact on extricating the Los Angeles Police Department from the national security state apparatus and from so-called anti-terrorist functions, which I think are inappropriate for a domestic law enforcement agency. And in relation to what you said about department strength, I'm wondering if you could comment on the information that's been put out about the extent to which there have been abuses of the retirement program in which people retire and simultaneously stay in the department and then have gone out on disability and triple dipped, if my understanding is correct, of some of the funding of the department and reducing the available officers. So those are 3 questions, if you could answer them.
Thank you. Next
Paula
speaker.
Miner, please.
Adding to Chief Moore's significant incidents and activities, July 13th, during the heat wave, a volunteer outreach worker brought water to houseless people. She came upon a young woman about 9 months pregnant, in pain, on the ground, naked in a blanket, obviously severely mentally ill. The woman appeared to be in labor and stress. The worker asked if she wanted help. She said yes. When the paramedics came, the woman screamed out of fear and refused to go with the paramedics. Other women at the encampment told the volunteer worker that the young woman had been regularly assaulted and raped by houseless men and was therefore afraid of the paramedics. The worker went to the nearby police station, and the police said they couldn't do anything if that individual had refused help. The worker had to shield the woman and her few belongings from the sanitation sweep. The worker called LASA, the ERT unit. They said they could not help. After nearly 4 hours, a colleague of the worker said, try to call the mayor's office. The worker called, and Christina Miller of the mayor's staff called LAPD. Then paramedic unit 46 came and took the young woman to the hospital, where she did go into labor. The worker said after the mayor's office called, Sergeant Lan Garcia helped, as did officers Hurtado, Reeves, and Casado. I report this here because in this room, LAPD is given the responsibility, and a lot of money is approved to handle situations like this. If a business had called to report this woman sleeping in front of their door, LAPD would have responded swiftly and removed her. But because LAPD is not a psych unit and not a homeless services unit, although this commission wants them to play like they are, this kind of inhumane treatment occurs every day. It's just not reported and not documented.
Thank you. Who's the next speaker?
Lisa Hines.
Lisa? Lisa?
Mr. Moore, I just want to know, do you come in with the mindset of changing the police department, improving it for the better of the people? Or do you plan to go out with the same legacy as Charlie Beck, which is answer? Okay.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The Red Chief Hunt, followed by Adam Smith.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
I guess after the chief's report, I like to bring up the narrative that's set every time that the chief talks about police shootings, specifically when people are killed, which your stats show you're getting better at percentage-wise. Because obviously, whatever you say here goes to the LA Times and goes to any media that is here, although they usually leave by this time. And it's just really troubling because you kill these people twice, They die from the gun violence or whatever it is, however, the tasers, the beanbags, and then they die again in the media, in the information that is sent out by the police to the media. And I wonder why these force investigations take so long when they're like 10, 11 months, 12 months sometimes. And at the end of it, it's the same thing that the chief said in his report days after a shooting. And I want to ask specifically, bring up Tyler Honeycutt, who was the person that wasn't named here, which is also a problem. Like, say the person's name. Tyler Honeycutt was the one that died in Van Nuys. Supposedly, you said in your report that it appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In 2 of the 3 officer-involved shootings that are in closed session today, Hammond and Bogart, both, they're like identical circumstances. Someone calls a man with a gun, officers show up, they perceive a threat or say that the person shot at them, they shoot back, SWAT comes, they stand outside, they find the person dead inside. Like, this is a thing that keeps happening. So, if these policies are killing people, maybe we should start thinking about different ways to approach.
Gina Viola, followed by Jonathan Foster.
You've reached FBI headquarters. You have reached the FBI to report public corruption, a civil rights violation. Press 4. Wait time 30 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm Jonathan Foster. To report this crime, it's unfortunate I have to make this phone call. Retiring Chief Charlie Beck. Right now, he's covering up committing a civil rights crime. The whole police commission is covering up a jail death of Waukesha Wilson. They're saying committed suicide. But he can be arrested after he's retired, though. This particular handling, they can't find 22 minutes of video. They are not arresting the jail staff. There's just so much misconduct going on. Like, it's being easily dismissed by just firing an employee. And once we really can see that it's negligent, then we know that it's a civil rights crime. That's the first crime. They're also covering up 2 officers. They get a report with somebody's in the area, I think, with a gun. See a guy walking on the sidewalk, and they get out and they pull the guns and shoot at the guy and kill him. No questions asked yet. No one's been identified. The crime scene, nothing's been assessed. While they jump out of the car, the officer doesn't put it in park, so actually it mistakenly rolls onto now the shot suspect, and then he ends up losing his life. These are federal crimes they're committing. Unfortunately, while being city police officer, they can't just get out of a car and shoot at somebody on the sidewalk. They are not releasing video, and they're saying that they followed police protocol. I'm sorry, there's a federal problem with Los Angeles police protocol, and the only way to change it is somebody has to be busted for a crime. The collusion that's going on with the district attorney, Jackie Lacey, is covering up everything. When I'm seeing families that have no recourse on this unless the federal government gets involved.
It's a crime.
The next speaker is Valerie Rivera.
Hi, Michael Moore. I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm Valerie Rivera, the mom of Eric Rivera, who was shot last year. Will you be willing to talk to me like one-on-one? I mean, I'm willing to come every Tuesday and take my 4 minutes out the week to come out and talk in front of all these cameras, news reporters, all that stuff. But I mean, you know, I come out every week and, you know, it's a shame that you all are allowing these murderous cops to still be working. And, you know, you talk about de-escalation, you talk about, you know, less use lethal force and stuff. But Eric, he literally just got shot down and ran over. And he didn't do anything wrong. He was actually unarmed. He had a freaking water pistol in the middle of June, you know? And I've seen the video now. I don't know if you've seen the video, but I've seen the video now. And I know exactly what happened. And as soon as that cop jumped out his car with his gun in his hand that's the reason why he couldn't even put it in park, was because he already had his pistol in his hand. And he jumps out. And in a matter of 1 second, my son's already being shot down. And in the meantime, as he's shooting, his partner's shooting at my son. My son's being shot by both guys. As their car is still going straight towards my son. By the time the car hit my son was already dead. Mr. Soboroff, can I get my 2 minutes public? Thank you. My son was already gone. By the time his partner realizes that the car is still in drive, the passenger, which is a rookie, I guess, as far as I knew, he had been serving like 8 years already, but I don't know how he's a rookie unless he's new to the Harbor Division. I'm so confused. But his partner tells him, the car is still in drive, step on the brakes. So he's trying to catch up to the car. And by the time the car hits my son and he gets to the car, he slams on the fucking gas. And the only thing stopping the car was that gate that stopped it from running over my baby's face. They were negligent the whole time. They wrongfully murdered my son. This department should be ashamed of having men as officers like that working for y'all. It's really shameful. I don't feel comfortable knowing that these cops are still working. They're still patrolling. And you know, what's messed up about it all is I feel like the department is giving them a pat on the back for the death of my son. I feel like those officers, when they go to work, they hold their head up really high and proudful that they murdered him. And that's sad. I get no remorse. They will probably never say sorry. They will probably never tell me, you know what, I'm fucked up. I am so sorry. The least I could have done was made sure that car didn't run over your baby. And I know that cop knows he made a mistake because in the video it shows him, he's wanting to pull that car off of him. He's like, let me go pull the car off of him. And his partner's like, no, he's armed, which we all know he's not armed. I know what they look like now. I've seen the pictures of their faces. And they took that picture of the driver immediately after he killed Eric, and he has a smirk on his face, like he did something good for the department.
Thank you.
You know, so I don't know. I've tried reaching out to Charlie Beck, but he was a lousy police chief of police. Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and the final speaker on this item, Melina Abdullah.
I'm sorry, final speaker, what?
Go ahead, Eddie H.
He already called you. Yeah, yes. Eddie, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
And then Professor.
Eddie H. Chief Moore, I'm not fooled by you. One of the first things you said is that you quoted what the mayor said about people talking loudly and saying nothing. That was a direct assault on those of us who fight for justice, liberation, and freedom. We know who he was talking to. And you're just going to be another puppet of his. And I just want to say this. I have 3 mothers in the audience today. The mother of John Horton, Eric Rivera, and Waukesha Wilson, all murdered by the hands of the LAPD. But you know something about that, because you are also a murderer and also an individual that shot someone. Coming from a department that has shot the most people in the last several years, any department in this country, has also murdered the most people in this country of any department. And we're talking about bias policing. We know from the Inspector General's office over the last several years, 500 complaints of bias policing for the last 2 or 3 years. Out of all of those complaints, not one came back sustained. I don't know if everybody here knows that, but your given name is not Michael Moore. It was something else. But someone told you a long time ago that you need to change your name because you're going to be discriminated against. Wow. You see this here? I can't change this, nor do I want to. I am a proud male of African descent. But you're able to change your name because there's discrimination. But we are to believe that there's no discrimination in a police department, right, that has a history of discrimination, going all the way back to Parker. But we can't find one sustained, not one out of thousands of complaints. And I just want to say this to everybody in this room. White America needs to deal with their mental illness. This obsessive compulsive disorder, behavior, and action that's being perpetrated throughout this country against people, men, women, and children of African descent. Nobody talks about that. But we can come in here and talk about mental illness of people that's being killed by the hands of people that's supposed to be.
Next speaker, please.
Melina Abdullah.
And then who else?
That's the last speaker on this item.
Okay. Then we go to public comment.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I listened to your report and took good notes, and I've also been listening to a lot of what you've been saying to community groups and in the media. So we hope that you live up to your pledge. We hope that we have 0 killed by police. We hope that that's the kind of department that you will create, that you'll build. We also want to request that when you give your chief's report that you include in those numbers the number of people who've been killed in custody. So not just officer-involved shootings, but out of remembrance for people like Waukesha Wilson, we need to know who died in custody. How many in custody deaths were there? Because we know that that's you're minimizing the number when you don't include those. I want to point you to the same report that I pointed the commission to, which is the People's Power Report, because in that report, it asks South LA residents, how do we want to solve these issues? And what 75% of South LA residents said is the way in which we want to solve the issues is by investing in housing, investing in mental health resources, investing in youth workers, not police youth workers, real youth workers. And so what courage would be is to say there are some limitations to law enforcement. We've heard you say that you want LAPD in every park, on every church pew, and every restaurant. What community is saying is we don't want you there. We don't want you in every park. We want youth workers in every park. We don't want you responding to houseless crises. We want people who are trained to do that work responding. And so that's what we're challenging you with, is putting that forward, And so I'll just stop there.
Do you have public comment card in? You can go for another 2 minutes. Do you have a public comment card in?
Not yet.
One of you.
She does not have
go,
one, sir.
Go ahead. Take your 2 minutes on public comment.
Say this for public comment.
Yeah.
You also have an opportunity to do something different. You like to play these little games with no water inside the room. What is that? Why? What is it with these egos that are like this ongoing plan, this ongoing game of repressing, suppressing, and oppressing people? That's ridiculous, and you know it's ridiculous. That's never been a rule. It's a new rule because you guys have your panties in a bunch, right? But we're sitting here, we've been here 2.5 hours without access to water. It's not like you provide water inside. If you want to prevent us from coming in with water, then provide it inside, right? These kinds of things, the idea of surrounding people with police is oppressive. You have an opportunity to turn the corner. And I'm just going to say also finally, and this is partially to the chief, just to underline the point, those 2 officer-involved shootings, those families, when they called 911 on their loved ones, they did not call 911 because they wanted the police to come in and either allow or encourage or whip up the mental health conditions that their loved ones were facing. They were calling for help. So to result in one is now dead and the other one is now in the hospital means that we have to stop thinking that they are the answer to our problems, right? We need to think about how do we shift those city funds from 53% of the general fund going to LAPD to shifting those funds so we have real community help that can talk to folks about their mental health conditions, that can provide housing to folks who need it, that can really mentor our...
Okay, so let's go to public comments now. How many public comments do we have?
Public comment period. We have 12 comment cards.
Okay.
The first 3, John Avalos, Paula Miner, and the Red Chief Hunt.
Okay. So what are you doing? No, wait, it's not your time to give away, it's your time to use. Do you have a card in? Okay, so that's fine. So you waiving your time? Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir.
Can you state your name, please?
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. My son's name is John Horton, that was beat to death in Men's Central Jail in 2009. I'm still fighting to get justice for him. And I would like to speak to you, Chief, more about how you planning to run your department and your officers. I was a teenager in Watts, growing up in Watts, seeing all my friends being brutalized, mistreated. We couldn't even stand in front of our yards and talk 2 or 3 at a time without being put on cars, hot cars. I mean, really, really mistreated. We was treated like we was somebody in another country, hopping out of cars on us, and we just standing there talking. And right today, we know that kids are being treated the same exact way. It's the same exact way. So we really hope that you are coming to this, your department, and will run this department like it's supposed to be run. Not just taking care of each other and looking out for just y'all officers, just looking out for each other, making it just about y'all. We really hope y'all turn this around, because you can. If you think about us, the people, and not your officers and y'all inside secret societies, because we know that exists. We know it well. Like Valerie sitting over here, you know that your department murdered her, your officers murdered her child. That's not in policy, running over somebody. Waukesha Wilson found dead in her cell with a BS video that's missing 22 minutes, and y'all want us to sit back and accept that. We won't. We will fight y'all to the end. And what y'all don't want us to do is run our own police, our own community. Because us mothers, we got the power.
Next speaker, please.
We have the power to take over our own community. You don't want us to get y'all jobs out the way and police our own community. Because, see, we can band together as mothers because we do have the power.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, please, John Avalos.
You don't want us to put y'all on y'all jobs. You don't want that.
He waived his.
We can get together and run our own and police our own communities and put y'all on business. So y'all keep this treating us.
I think John waived. John waived his.
And we'll be on every street corner watching
After
all
John.
y'all.
John Avalos, followed by Paula Minor.
Paula Minor.
My name is John Avalos. I live over there in Echo Park, Eagle Rock, and right in between. I'm a part-time worker. I'm sorry that I chuckled when you said when you quoted the mayor. We had to chuckle. I started coming to these meetings when I heard the story of Waukesha Wilson. And if anywhere, this is where people have been speaking loud. So his comment, and I always wondered, where is the mayor? Where is his staff? They never come here. So that's why we laughed. And I know I seem like a horrible human being to you right there, laughing at you, praising the mayor. Man. I've watched people parents get dragged out of here. Imagine what I go through sitting there watching Melina get dragged out by a bunch of people. A lot of these people have been dragged out. Elderly man, oh, where is he? That elderly man, remember Melina, what was his name? Ted Hayes. I was here when Ted Hayes, an elderly, very articulate, he was dragged out of here. Where is he, by the way? And then there are new laws. You created some arbitrary, I think you were talking, Melina, about arbitrary rules they suddenly they make. There are certain people that cannot even come to these meetings because of your rules. Mr. Hayes, I bet you outlawed him. You outlawed Waukesha's aunt. She cannot come here no more, right? Oh, good, good. Oh, Akili. So I've been watching all this going on.
Next speaker, please.
Paula Minor. She's not here. The Red Chief. Amador Cuevas.
Keep going.
Victor Trujillo.
Can I interpret for my uncle?
Sure.
Okay, my uncle is Amador M. Cuevas. His property was actually, there was a slip and fall. 6 years later, we find out the tenant was cahoots with some attorneys, and we found out LAPD and Foothill Division was involved, but we tried to get a police report for 6 years. They wouldn't help him. And I knew about this case because 30 years ago it happened to my parents. And I understood this because I worked with a lot of gangs back in the days before they were started back in Pacoima when I was a kid. So I knew how to get these people and set it up. But every time I went to make a police report, they couldn't help me because my uncle, he does not, he's a knowledgeable man. He has no clue about gangs or how police put, they put their informants out there. I had a lot of family members were informants, and they would tell me, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what day that guy's going to get killed. We knew about murders. So when people tell, I'll give you a murder that was done at the courthouse. His name was Robert Hagen. He was killed, and his attorney had a friend of ours execute him. And I went to the LAPD to go and get the murder, go and have an investigator. He tells me, let it go. You don't want to mess with nobody. I talked to Martinez, a detective on unsolved murders. He tells me, I can't help you. That's the kind of atmosphere I'm dealing with. So if this man can't get a police report, he just wants a police report. That's all he wants, because now the people confess they were in cahoots. We have investigators, detectives that from private detectives he hired to get the case looked at by a court, by the system. LAPD and Foothill Division tells us we don't have a department. They've been doing that for the 6 years trying to get a police report for him. Why? We can arrest people, but we can't arrest officers. Why is this being covered up and organized crime? Why are we have to sit here? I sat with them. He got kidnapped almost 3 times at his house in Rialto, and I told him a month before I got tipped off they're going to try to kidnap him. He didn't believe me. Well, guess what? 3 kidnappings went down, and you know what the officer in Rialto said? Oh, we don't do nothing. Oh, we don't know nothing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. No, what happened
that was my error.
After a minute, they missaid it. So if you said you wanted to interpret something for him, but he hasn't said anything, so would you like to say something? So I thought you finished speaking.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was
but he didn't
2
say
minutes.
anything yet. So
Okay, so
no, take your time, sir.
But they never put an interpreter for me. Even the court. But I did the police report because of this. Yeah, exactly. I did the police report, so I can fight back because this is a criminal case. It's not a civil case no more. They have tried to kill me, and the last time my own lawyers told me if they already have it in their name, the property. I said, why? They said, now the only way you can do it is either you die or the person dies the other way. I said, what is this? This is a killing thing? I'm not a criminal. I am a senior citizen, 79 years of age. I need, please, help me.
Thank you.
To get the police report. I need it.
Chief, go ahead. Let the chief respond. Yeah, Chief.
I can certainly, if you feel like there's something that the department has not done that they are required to do, one thing you do is come and talk to our office. My name is Mark Smith. I'm the Inspector General for LAPD, and I've got some staff who are here who can meet with you right now just to try to understand what the concern is and see if there's anything that we can do to assist you, okay?
Good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. No, you guys are way over time. So we're going to go to the next speaker. Next speaker, please. Sir, why don't you talk to the Inspector General?
The Inspector General can help you. Okay? Okay. Very good.
next speaker, Michael Novick, followed by Jeffrey Jashad.
John Mack and whatever his strengths or weaknesses as a commissioner was, his primary role was as the civil rights spokesperson. If you want to honor Mr. Mack, I don't think you should do so by naming this room after him. I think you should do so by taking your meetings out of this room and out of the police administration building and meet in the community in the evenings when people can attend. You can move to different parts of the city and hear from people at the grassroots and street level. And if you want to make a change, maybe the chief could recommend that. You seem to respond to reports and proposals from the department much more favorably than you do from any comments from the public that you get here. So I would urge the chief to recommend that to the commission. I would urge the commission to adopt that. My other comment is that you often seem to be disturbed or impatient with both public comments in general, and particularly when people raise the name of Waukesha Wilson or Eric Rivera. And if you're tired of hearing about Waukesha Wilson or Eric Rivera, imagine how the parents feel. I'm somebody who lost a child, and I can tell you that you don't stop grieving that loss. It doesn't end. It doesn't stop. And so that's a loss that's on your hands. and you have responsibility to deal with it. And until you deal with it, until those 22 minutes are accounted for, until the violation of the process took place that you claim that was settled, you reached a settlement, you found it in policy, and then they went ahead and fired somebody from the department or from the detention services, that's unjust. And so you're going to continue hearing about it. And I'll just, to paraphrase the Disney film, Waukesha forever.
Jeffrey Deshad.
Good afternoon. I had three things. I guess I'll try and cover it quickly. Number one, I read the Brown Act a few times. I guess there's at least one lawyer here still. From my interpretation, it says that there's no requirement for registration, or there shall be no requirement for registration or giving of personal information to attend the meeting. I'm sure that you have lawyers or whatever that would disagree, but in my interpretation, the concept of speaker cards is kind of not in the spirit, shall we say, of the concept that you're not required to register to attend. I believe intend implies participate, so that's kind of one thing. That's just my interpretation.
You don't have to put your name on. You can, but we have to identify people to call up some way.
Okay.
So if
yeah,
you want to put a red X, we'll call up the red
like,
X.
For instance, like I spend some time in the academic world, let's say, or I follow things online like that. If someone gives like a book conference, for instance, they have people line up. They don't make them identify themselves. They just say, okay, we're going to have public comment on this issue. If you'd like to comment, you have your 2 minutes. To me, that would make more sense and be more amenable to the spirit of what I think could be accomplished or whatever, what have you. I was in county jail for a few months. And in the process of that, I had a bunkie who was arrested in Koreatown. He had $600 on him. He was a drug dealer, admittedly. When he was booked into jail, he had $6 on his books, so that's about $594, give or take. From my point of view, talking to a lot of people, that seems to be a common accepted practice. So that's kind of, again, not in the spirit of the ideal that you could strive for, to have just...
Are you talking about the county jail?
Yeah, he was arrested by LAPD in Koreatown for distribution or something like that. So if he had $600 on him, I would like to think that he would have $600 on his books. He may be a drug dealer, that's true, but it's still theft from most people's point of view. I have one last one. Actually, I'll just let it go at that for 2 minutes.
Good, thank you, sir.
The next speaker, Adam Smith, followed by Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, continuing what you just said, if you look at the city budget, they make some good money off asset forfeiture. So, I just want to lift up again the water thing. We still haven't gotten an answer as to why we're not allowed to have drinks, but you all are. The sensitive Chief Beck is gone. I don't know if it was ash related or if he was worried that someone was going to throw ash on him and rinse him off.
We'll look at it. Next, go ahead, keep going.
How many times have we brought this up? What do you mean we'll look at it?
Want to keep talking about it, or do you want us to look at it?
Ooh.
Go ahead, it's your time, go ahead.
Then shut the fuck up.
Jeez.
I don't come in here to swear at people. Jesus. You're interrupting me. It's my time. You're not answering anything. Just be quiet. Going back to the biased policing, which I didn't bring up, which is a serious problem, is that the only people, for the most part, that are arrested in this room, that are criminalized in this room, regardless of how loud other people are usually black women. So we can talk about perceptions of bias on a street and whatever, but we see it here at the supposed top. So that's all I got for that one.
Thank you. Next.
Jonathan Foster.
Is this the last speaker?
We have three more on this item. We have Eddie H., Dante, and Valerie Rivera. Dante Raymond.
Ms. Rivera spoke her public comment already.
Sorry for using the F word here earlier.
Yeah.
Probably nobody even cares, but
No.
it does talk about it in the Bible to watch what comes out of your mouth. Not this department, but a guy named Kelly Thomas was a white, skinny, schizophrenic guy, and the cops sat on him and suffocated him to death. He had no gun or weapon. And so that wasn't the LAPD, but he was white. And so you are all under arrest again. I haven't said it to him, but this is a citizen's arrest. You're under arrest. I wish I could put the cuffs on you and walk you into the jail, buddy. And him, all this. Special Order 40 has led to the deaths of other police officers in and around greater LA area, and you are the contributors to the deaths hanging on to Special Order 40. How do you plead? I'll put it in like the judge does. I'll put it in for you. Guilty. Just write it down here. Guilty. Special Order 40, this is the aspect of life that makes me the angriest. I want all who support Special Order 40 and that's led to the deaths of police officers, I want you lethally injected, arrested, prosecuted, and put to death. The commission claims constitutional policing, which is a lie, and then it says it's a city police department can make its own policy. Then it claims it's a public service, but claims by state law it has confidentiality. Go figure. So, you know, with the FBI and Homeland Security and the political people and the political appointees and all this billionaires and stuff, and I just have no hope in the United States of America at all anymore. I don't want to be an American. I don't even want to live here because this commission makes my head suck.
Next speaker, please.
Eddie H.
Next speaker.
Dante Raymond Ivory.
It's the last speaker, Dante.
Last speaker on this item. There are no other
Okay.
cards. We're now in item number 5, closed session. We do have 4 cards. We have on 5A1, Mr. Novick and Adam Smith.
How about 2?
2, we have Victoria Stockton, and 3, we have Adam Smith.
Okay. Novick?
Yeah, this is 5A1, 2, and 3, really. You have 3 officer-involved shootings that you're looking at this week going back to July and early August of last year. So you continue to be, a year behind. You're talking about 9 police officers in the 3 different incidents, plus 2 sergeants, 1 lieutenant, and a deputy chief. That's a total of 13. And week after week, you're looking at anywhere from 6 to a dozen or more officers involved in shootings. So I think you have to look at that systemically. That's 50 weeks a year. That's quite a large number of officers within the department. It's
Mr.
not
Novak,
just
I just want to make sure so you're clear because this is really important. Each of those individuals did not fire their guns.
No, I understand that
Okay, just want to be clear.
Yeah, I understand that probably 1 officer or 2 officers may be fired, and I doubt the deputy chief took a weapon out in that incident, but they're still involved. They're involved in incidents, and so all I'm saying is that it's not a small problem. It's a big problem, and week after week you can look at individual cases, but you have to look at it in a systemic way and deal with it in a systemic way if you're going to solve it. I do appreciate, Chief Moore, that you actually listen and pay attention, and you seem to be respectful as compared to your predecessor to people coming forward at these meetings. So I appreciate that. I do have a question. I'm curious, are the police commissioners remunerated for their service at all?
No.
Okay, so you're volunteers. The others, I know that you're making about $1,000 a day as police chief, so your time is valuable, and I appreciate the fact that you take some of it to listen to us, but I don't think that you need to worry about the volume with which people speak. You need to think about the content, and the content that's been put forward here today, I think is content you need to take very seriously indeed.
Next speaker, this is on item 5A1.
5A1, Adam Smith.
Smith?
I don't have the notes that I took because my son needs my phone, but don't worry about how I speak in front of my son. He spends a lot of time with Valerie Rivera. He spends a lot of time with Helen Jones and Lisa Hines, and he hears horrible stories about people being killed by the police. So if I drop an F-bomb here or there, he's not going to be too troubled. For Gerald Hammond, and I brought it up before when you were talking about Tyler Honeycutt's death on July 6th. It's a very similar situation, and it just goes to show that obviously we all know that the LAPD kills the most people across all U.S. police departments every year. Garcetti had some canned response once about population and the size of the city when obviously...
I'll stay on the topic of this specific, which is OS 05817, involved party Hammond. So why don't you stay on topic?
Okay.
Thank you.
So Mr. Hammond had the police called on him, apparently. Supposedly had a gun in a hotel room, if I remember correctly. Opened the door, supposedly pointed the gun at officers who shot him. He then supposedly closed the door, barricaded himself. These are words, obviously, from LAPD reports and media reports. Barricaded himself, SWAT came, and then found him dead after entering the room, and questioned whether or not it was a suicide or whether he was shot by police. And it's just verbatim pretty much what the language is around Tyler Honeycutt a few weeks ago. So if this is going to continue happening, what are we doing? What are you all doing to, stop these killings from happening? If the same cops get called, person ends up dead, and the details are pretty much the same. So what are we doing different to change that?
On item number 582.
We have Victoria Stockton.
On August 4th, 2017, I didn't call 911. I'd actually called 911 the week before for a 5150 attempt, and you people couldn't show up. The next week, I called because he'd been drinking heavily. The night of the incident, his blood alcohol content was .308. Your officers followed me up the porch and allowed me to unlock the front door and followed me in. Charlie Beck made a false statement to the LA Times.
Is it about this incident?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
Charlie Beck made a false statement to the LA Times that you people knew he was armed. And if that was the case, why did you allow me to open the front door and why did you follow me in? I didn't know he was armed any more than you did. I told you he had been drinking, told your officers there that night. We got within 7 feet of Todd, I did. He started to turn around. He had his back to the door. He started to turn around to see who was coming in behind him. And as he did, a rifle barrel went up this way. The officers drew and said, "Sir, drop your weapon," one time, and the officer at the door, bam, fired. To a violation right in my own house. And then Charlie Beck makes a false statement to the LA Times that I'm told by your office, Inspector General, that it doesn't matter because Charlie Beck is gone now. Your officers murder with impunity, 6 unjustified in 2016. Where are the good cops calling for the justice for the families of all of those people who were murdered by those cops, those good cops? Where are the good cops? I don't see any. And the lies, the murder, how, as a civilian, a resident of this once good city, I believe it was, I grew up here, how do I go on with my life with the lies and the murder that I got to witness thanks to you? I called you for help, and this is what happened. You don't even want to hear my testimony for the hearing today. I've called and offered to take a lie detector test. I was there. Rogelio Rendon almost took my head off trying to shoot Todd. Shot him through his arm and into his chest as he's trying to turn around to see who's coming in behind him. That's the brave officers of LAPD.
Okay, we have one person on 583. We have Adam Smith.
Smith, are you going to speak on 3?
Pretty much just going to raise the same points. Eric Bogart was in Pacific Palisades. There was some kind of domestic disturbance. The police were called. They showed up, and again, I don't have my notes because I don't have my phone. But if I remember correctly, the police claimed that he pointed a gun. The officers that had responded to the residents returned fire. He barricaded himself, called SWAT. SWAT came, surrounded the house, eventually went in and found that he was dead. And so, you know, I think it's just worth pointing out that this keeps happening. These forced investigations shouldn't take a year. Yeah, you just killed 17 last year and kill them throughout the year during these forced investigations. With any media that comes out, they just, you know, and it makes me wonder, like, in the case that the woman was just talking about with Todd Hurlbert, like, it's easy. Is it easier to kill them than? Because you can just criminalize them. You can say he pointed a gun, or his neon green water pistol looked like a black semi-automatic weapon. See you next week.
We have no other cards, sir. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 5A, 1, 2, and 3 in accordance to Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted as amended. In closed session, item number 5A2 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. And in closed session, item number 5A3 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Happy day.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we'll see.
Hola, soy Marisol, desde Canoga Park, la ciudad toda americana. Estás viendo LA City View, Canal 35, nuestra ciudad, nuestro canal.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Adopt